All right.
Recording in progress.
Call to order the Tuesday, March 19th meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Casissa.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas. Here. Vice Mayor Ravazio. Here. Mayor Beckman.
Here. Please join me in the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody. Now we're going to have open time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. If you'd like to speak on something that's not on our agenda and you're here in person, please go ahead and go to the podium here. If you'd like to speak via Zoom on an item not on our agenda, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom and we will bring you online. Do we have anyone in person tonight who would like to give open time public comment? And I'm not seeing any. Lorena, do we have any hands up on Zoom?
We do not have any hands raised on Zoom. Sorry for the delay. And we don't have new emails, emailed public comment for open time. We did receive a few and they were added to the website and are available for the public to view, and were also shared with council.
Perfect. Thank you. So seeing no public comment for open time, we're going to close open time. We have no presentations tonight, so we'll move on to our consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been previously discussed and do not require further discussion. Any member of the council or public may pull a consent calendar item for discussion. Would any members of the council like to pull a consent calendar item for discussion? Seeing none, we'll open the consent calendar up to public comment. If anyone in the public would like to pull a consent calendar item for discussion, please go ahead and go to our podium if you're here in person, or raise your hand on Zoom. Not seeing anyone jumping for the podium here in person. Do we have any hands up on Zoom?
We do not have any hands raised on Zoom or emailed public comment for the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. I'll close public comment on the consent calendar and bring item 4A through 4F back to the council for a motion.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve consent items 4A through 4F.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. We have no public hearings tonight, so we're going to move on to our business items, the first of which is 6A. This is consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 12, 2024, receiving and accepting the 2023 Housing Element Annual Progress Report, and I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor Beckman, council members. I'm Tracy Hegarty. I'm a planner with the town. Sorry about the font. It looks like it's not the default font on that computer. We'll hope you can read everything. State law requires each local jurisdiction to produce a housing element annual progress report, or APR, on the status and progress in implementing the town's housing element. The APR includes information on the jurisdiction's progress in addressing the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, housing production targets, and the status of housing element programs and policies. Just a bit of background, as you all know, on June 20th, 2023, the town council adopted the 6th cycle housing element for the 2023-2031 planning period. And on August 15th, HCD certified the housing element. The APR you're reviewing tonight includes not only the number of permitted housing units produced in Corte Madera, but also includes information about the town's progress in implementing housing element programs and policies that were adopted to facilitate and promote housing and to comply with state law. The attachment to the resolution is Exhibit A, and on pages 6 to 13 is Table D, which reflects a description and status of those various programs. The 2023 APR represents progress made in the first year of the housing cycle towards meeting a RHNA allocation of 725 units. The total is at the bottom row of that top table there. It says 725 on the left. and RENA allocation for each income category is the left-hand column. The APR collects a variety of information about new housing units. Town's progress towards meeting RENA is measured by building permits issued for new housing units. And in 2023, a total of 6 housing units, which were all ADUs, were permitted in 2023. However, HCD does allow some units permitted during the projection period, which is June 30th, 2022 to January 30th, 2023, to be counted again in the 6th cycle. The town had a total of another 6 ADUs were permitted during that time frame. And if allowed by HCD, staff is seeking to also include the 18 multifamily units at the Casa Buena, which would adjust the total units reflected in the APR for this year to 30 units. The 18 units are not shown on the APR form as yet. That requires a manual change by HCD. The second table barely shown on the screen is for informational purposes. It's not part of the APR, but it does show housing unit production the last several years in Corte Madera. Since 2016, as a result of state law and the increasing flexibility of state law related to ADUs, many of the new housing units in Corte Madera were ADUs and JADUs. Additionally, the town has currently received 8 SB9 urban lot split applications. And we have had several discussions with property owners about their applications for an SB9 2-unit development. We think we'll start to see more of those types of applications in the future, in the very near future. SB 35 was effective January 1st in 2018. Many of you are most likely familiar with it, and it applies to localities that haven't met their RENA obligations. It creates a streamlined approval process for certain qualified housing projects, providing a ministerial approval process, and most famously removes the requirement for CEQA analysis and removes the ability of the town to apply discretionary entitlements with the Planning Commission to those housing projects. SB 35 is not applied in Corte Madera. We met and we far exceeded our housing production targets in the 5th cycle. We produced 295 housing units and our target was 72. So that computes to about 410% of what was required. According to HCD, the streamlined development review process under SB 35 would apply to jurisdictions that haven't met a minimum of 50% of their RENA targets at the midpoint of the cycle. And that means that table shown on the screen here is showing you what 50% of our housing target would be at the midpoint of the cycle. If housing production isn't increased in Corte Madera, it's very likely SB 35 is going to apply here. I just wanted to highlight one example of implementation of our housing element and planning for new housing in Corte Madera, and that is Ordinance 1026. A significant component of the housing element is the housing sites inventory, which requires the town to identify specific locations for housing development or redevelopment. And that ordinance was adopted January 2023. A majority of our RENA numbers will likely come from these sites. Planning staff has spoken with numerous prospective developers interested in these housing opportunity sites, and Amy and Martha can speak to that if you're interested for more information there. And that concludes my report. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Tracy, thanks so much for the update. Do we have any questions from council members? None this way. Pat?
If it's okay, just a couple questions. I don't get to see Tracy much, so I know she knows things. So if there are other properties in town that aren't listed on the RENA list, but a property owner comes and says, I would like to put housing there, that's still doable? So just because it's not on the list doesn't mean that it can't be developed as housing?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It doesn't, to develop housing within Corte Madera, it's not required to be on one of these housing opportunity sites.
Okay. And then also, I've been hearing a lot from people about ADUs lately because everybody loves the idea of using ADUs to fulfill our housing because it's the real way to infill right into our communities. But I'm hearing that it's still expensive and difficult, and I'm wondering if that's why the ADUs went from 22 and 21 down to 16, then to 6. I mean, shouldn't the number of ADUs be increasing in town, and what can we do to stimulate that?
The 2021 number was showing 22 ADUs constructed that year. That does include the 8 ADUs at Robin Drive. So if you
Okay,
exclude that, that would
So
be
minus 8.
13
okay.
to 12 to 6.
Uh-huh.
And maybe interest rates perhaps could have affected people's
Yeah.
decisions to construct ADUs or
Okay.
our emergence from the pandemic and other ways to spend money. Those are that's based upon my conversations with individuals. We do still get a very significant amount of people interested in constructing ADUs. And while our regulations and state regulations provide additional flexibility, I'm afraid that the construction industry, meaning the cost of construction, is not helping, I think. And again, that statement's based upon just my conversations with applicants and some of the applicants that really have applied for ADUs and haven't moved forward.
Because of financial reasons. Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to expand on that. Good evening, Mayor Beckman and members of the council. So as far as implementation and what we're doing next, Martha's actually been working with an entity called the ADU Center, which has been successful in the North Bay, and their Marin jurisdictions are actually partnering to bring them south. And they will be providing really extreme help for homeowners to be able to get financing, their stock building
Oh,
plans.
great.
They really look at barriers to ADUs and work with local jurisdictions to remove them or navigate all the complexities of regulations. So they're really going to be helpful. And so they will be coming on board with us in the next few months. So we're hoping that that's going to increase the number of ADUs that we're seeing. And it'll also help us understand what we need to do in advance of updating our ordinance related to ADUs, which is on the work plan for this year as well.
So just a question on jargon. It's now ADU? It's not ADU?
I hear that I say it differently.
Oh, you do?
and
I kind of like ADU. It's kind of.
You know, and there's JDU and JADU. So
Oh, JADU, yeah. It's because junior
or
accessory
junior-
dwelling unit takes way too long to say. Okay, so just one more question then. What does it cost if somebody wanted to come in and do an ADU? What are they looking at in terms of fees to the town for permits? Just overall, just around a ballpark figure. Anybody?
I don't have
Nobody
that off the
knows?
top of my head.
It's very specific to the property and the project.
Yeah,
So one thing that the ADU Center does well is they will calculate the exact fees for an
Upfront.
applicant. So if you're
Perfect.
looking at their website and you're in one certain jurisdiction, you can say, this is the size that I want to do, and it'll actually calculate the impact fees based on the size, because we do relax a lot of the fees based on if you're under 750 square feet, things like that. But every jurisdiction is a little bit different. So one thing that will be helpful is that they will do that math for us and for our applicants and make it very clear what.
So you know upfront what you're getting into, you know what your costs are gonna be. That's great.
Yeah.
Like that's a good solution. I know that's hard to do because staff doesn't always know what it's gonna cost, but if they can provide that information up front, or at least a ballpark, you know, then people know more what they're getting into.
And we do strive to understand what those costs are and help them at the beginning, and just to be able to manage those expectations.
Mhm. Can I ask one more question
Yeah.
while we have these people here, these great sources of information? The 1400 Redwood, the Macy's property, when they come to us with their ideas, how soon can we on the council give them some feedback? Like before they even drop their plans, can we give them some ideas for what we think they could do to make it a really wonderful addition to our community? Can we do that up front? Or do we have to wait until they come up with something?
Well, let me give you also a little bit of background on what's happening with that site right now. As part of the implementation of the housing element, we submitted an application to the Association of Area Governments for that priority site grant that I know you know about.
Mhm.
So we're waiting to hear back on that technical assistance grant to see if we're able to award that to that particular site. So we have been talking with them and know that they're starting to build a project out to be able to hopefully submit at some point in the future. And but I would suggest that if you have input at this time, it would be good maybe to talk to us directly. But because this is something that will be most likely coming before planning commission, potentially your council. So if you have an interest or input, it might be good just to.
Put it in writing or have a meeting, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I will just add, I mean, I've had conversations with Macy's team. They have a potential partner. They're working with Macerich, who owns part of that center, as well with Nordstrom's. Very complicated deal. They understand that we're interested in having early input, but they're not there yet.
That's great.
There's a ways to go. So
That's all we can ask.
the key point is that we have through this entire process, and one of the goals of actually reaching out to them through the housing element process was actually to establish these relationships that we actually are seen more as collaborating on these things, and they are using us as resources to identify what makes a great project here in Corte Madera. Likewise, we have that free flow of communication, and so they understand that our community is going to be interested in very early ideas and concepts for what gets developed there. If, and I will stay still when, well, I should say when, if and when that actually occurs. And,
Right.
you know, so.
We know the economy slowed things down for sure.
Yeah, and Macy's is clearly has other major priorities at the moment too, as well, that they're dealing with.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a quick question. Tracy, did I hear you correct that if we don't meet essentially half our numbers by 2026, SB 35 kicks in?
That's what HCD is telling us, yes.
Okay,
So that's when they'll issue a determination, our progress at each income cap.
okay. Because that's only like 2 years away, right?
Yeah, there is a bill in the legislature right now to move the sunset date later, but yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yes.
Thank you for your report. I'm just wondering, is it correct that when the ADUs and JDUs are approved, they are approved not necessarily to be rentals, but they're just approved. So we don't know if when they are built, will they actually be available, or would the homeowner be using them for their own,
We don't regulate the rental or not how they're going to be using the ADU, whether it's full house or for a family member.
Mhm.
JADU, when you build a JADU, the owner signs an affidavit stating they're going to live in one of the two units, but we don't know if they're used as owners or renters. There is the ability within our ADU ordinance to send a survey. So part of our code states that the owner of the ADU or JADU will participate in the survey. So there's an opportunity potentially in the future to ask that question.
Okay, and then if it doesn't become a rental, how does that affect our meeting our RENA numbers?
The prescribed forms that HCD asks us to use, ask us to answer whether it's an owner or a renter. And generally speaking, we're applying the renter status to ADU or JADU, but it doesn't affect how they count the units. If it's owner or renter, it's just the measure is really, was the building permit issued? They are also tracking, was it constructed? Is there a certificate of occupancy? But if it's not constructed, there's not a backtrack to modify that number. I think for a jurisdiction like Corte Madera, that would be very easy if they requested that, but for large jurisdictions with thousands of thousands.
Okay.
That answer your question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that or confirm one way or the other how that would affect our compliance going forward.
Yeah, owner occupied or renter occupied doesn't change whether or not we can count it towards our RENA progress. It counts,
Okay.
It counts either way.
Along this bill. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
I just have one related question to Rose's question, also related to, taking credit in RENA for ADUs that are built. It looked like all 6 of the units we built over the last year were ADUs, and I think we had 2 very low income, 2 low income, and 2 moderate income. And I'm just curious, how do we, if we don't even know whether they're being rented out, how do we go about assessing what income level we're gonna peg them for?
Based partly on size, but our housing element has policies that HCD's approved that state that we divide them up in 30% very low, 30% low, 30% moderate, 10% above moderate, or those types of housing units. And when we assign their income category on the actual APR, we're really looking at making sure that we divide them up pursuant to that allocation, and also that, you know, a 1,200 square foot ADU obviously is not a very low income. That's all in that.
Right. Thank you. Any last questions from council members?
Can I just
Yeah.
follow up with just a couple? Sorry, a lot of questions are coming to me. But I know I can get them answered at another time as well. But just to confirm, when an ADU is built, regardless of how it's used, your property taxes go up on that increased valuation of your property, right? So people will pay the increased property tax for the value of the ADU they've added, thereby making it greater for the town to do it because we get an increase in property taxes, correct? I mean, I'm just saying it's one more reason that we want to support ADUs. But my question is there a way for a homeowner to designate it as a low income affordable rental unit? I mean, does it work that way where I could like build an ADU and designate it as an affordable rental and or how does that work?
Some housing developments have deed restricted affordable units, and we don't apply that to ADUs. So I think homeowner, property owner with an ADU or JADU could elect to rent it at the affordable price. And we hear from some of our applicants that that's what they intend to do, or that is what they're doing. And we see some of the stories on adumarin.org of people that are renting to teachers, nurses, and whatnot, but not something that that's deed restricting. We don't require them to.
And is there any advantage to the homeowner to doing that in the town? Like, you know, a financial incentive to offer affordable housing? We'd have to consider something like that. Okay. All right, good. Thank you.
Eli, I'm sorry, just one more quick question. The 2 ADUs on El Camino, are those counted in the numbers yet?
That was, I think, last year or the year before.
Okay.
When the building permits were issued.
Okay, so it's when the permits are issued, not when they're actually occupied. Thanks.
All right, any last questions? All right, and if not, we'll open this up for public comment. So this is for public comment on our housing element annual progress report. Anyone here in person who'd like to speak, please go ahead and go to our podium here. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to speak, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. And I'm not seeing anyone lining up at the podium here. Do we have any hands up on Zoom?
We don't have any hands raised on Zoom or email public comment for this item.
Thank you. So we'll close public comment and bring this item back to the council, and we are looking for any discussion or thoughts, and if not, a motion on resolution number 12, 2024.
I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve, adopt resolution number 12/2024.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 6B tonight, and that is discussion and possible direction regarding options to create a classroom or gathering space for the town's senior community.
Great. Thanks very much, Mayor Beckman and council members.
Take your plaques with you. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Tracy.
Hello, Tim.
Next seating,
Got your name tag.
Give us a-
Tag up here.
7:00 reservation.
Okay, I'm going to give this presentation. I have Tim Berry here as well to help with any questions that the council may have. And I think we're also going to be hearing from some members of the public who I'm hopeful will be able to answer some questions potentially about past experience regarding sort of gathering space and senior space for and perhaps the intergenerational center that was active pre-pandemic. But really, this is an item that I know the council and staff heard from the council at the strategic planning workshop back on January 30th. Requesting an opportunity to discuss and perhaps provide some direction regarding options for the creation of a physical space that would allow seniors to gather and engage in age-appropriate activities. And so tonight, that's what I intend to do. This is sort of a first. Oh, thank you for putting that up there. I see this as really an iterative process. And tonight, I think if you go to maybe I can do this next slide. Sorry, put it at that thing. Yeah. Really, there's a few main goals that I think we want to have for this discussion. And as I said, I view this as really a check-in on the approach that staff will be taking or is going to take, and the approach that I'm sort of looking at this time in terms of exploring creating this space prior to expending additional town staff resources and time to explore feasibility of actually creating this space, which would be the next real phase of this process. And so just to be clear, we're not there yet. We're not here to ask the council, let's move forward with creating a space. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done there. I think another goal for tonight is to actually have a opportunity for the council and members of the public to understand what the need is, maybe the vision and goals for a new dedicated senior intergenerational center, whatever that vision is. And so, well, we can have some of that conversation as well. And I certainly am looking forward to some feedback on that from the council. And then I've outlined, based on really some preliminary work, investigation, just sort of talking to folks, Patty and Carla and Councilmember Ravazio and others, visiting a couple of sites. 3 general approaches toward actually making the creation of a new dedicated space for seniors a reality. And those, what I've listed in the staff report are 3 general options. Frankly, some maybe we'll find out in the next phase of work. Some may be more practical than others. There may be already certain feelings about each of those approaches. And so general feedback on any and all of those approaches. And if there are strong feelings about sort of going with one, at least as an immediate next step, that would be helpful to hear as well. Those 3 options are on the next slide, if you can, thanks. Really are focused around creating new space within town-owned or controlled facilities, such as the community center, Corte Madera Center, or even portables, for example, that we control. And there may be other town-owned facilities that we want to consider. And again, haven't gone through these thoroughly. There's the other option of outlined in the staff report of creating new space through town leased facilities, which would be essentially looking for a private space that the town could lease, and creating new space by supporting age-friendly Corte Madera in a space that they lease. And those were the 3 general options. And I will say, just going back, this is not a new idea, in town to have a space that's really dedicated and supporting activities and age-appropriate activities for our senior community. There's was the intergenerational center, which obviously wasn't just for seniors, but was a shared space for senior community and youth in town to come together and have classes and to basically engage in activities that sort of we're supporting a healthy aging in town. And so that was a space and a concept really started by Age Friendly Corte Madera and also Age Friendly Solutions. Carla Condon and Patty Stoley are here and can speak. I hope they can speak more intelligently than I can to that, because I certainly myself wasn't involved in that program. We also currently have senior programming or older adult programming that's operated and run by our town's park and recreation department today. And that was sort of emerging after COVID, as we tried to really sort of integrate some of those successful classes and programs that we could into the community center, which is obviously a shared space. The space previously occupied it was actually town offices, then it became the intergenerational center, and then COVID happened. And then after COVID, during COVID, we turned it back into office space as well. And so that there is classroom space, or I should say office space, that is dedicated now to town offices in our park and rec department. And so the main hall there is actually much more of a shared and program space that isn't really conducive to sort of classroom and separate program facilities during the course of a day. And so as far as lease space goes, just the other option, if we start to think about potentially looking at privately owned space that would essentially expand the capacity for the town to sort of dedicate space just for this sort of program offering. We have started to look at other potential spaces, and this is very early on, and I just use examples. There are vacant spaces out there. In talking to both Patty and Carla, the understanding, at least for the vision that they have, is about 2,000 square feet, mixture of open space and classroom facilities, potentially a kitchen and so forth. So looking for a space that might fit those needs, or working in partnership with them. I've looked at a couple spaces. So on the next slide, we just have a couple of images. This is 645 Temple Pius Drive, which is currently vacant. Obviously, this is next to the former mortuary and in between the Bank of America. So that's one site that is on the radar. Next slide. There's other 71 Casa Buena, which is a vacant commercial space over next to Pete's, former bank facility, near the library as well. And then so this is how early on we are. For example, we know we're leaving this space currently in another couple of months. So who knows, there's other spaces in town that may be worth exploring as well, if that's what we're looking for. So obviously the next phase or of the process is going to involve much more staff time and sort of some energy in sort of evaluating what would work and what doesn't, and certain criteria, we're going to have to really look at, which hopefully we can get at some tonight, sort of priorities in terms of cost. What is the vision that we're trying to actually accommodate through creating some new dedicated space? And of course, also we have existing really incredibly dedicated and passionate members of our community who have started and worked on really providing services for Corte Madera residents and beyond right here in Corte Madera. And so thinking about how that partnership and potential partnership might work would be another future step as well, that myself, along with our other members of our team would need to work on moving forward, and what that might look like. And so those are some of the things. If you go to the next, oh yeah, that was it. That was feedback. So some feedback, some questions that maybe would help me and staff as we move forward in the next phase, sort of listed here. And of course, any of those options that you might sort of think as a better alternative than others, or all three, that would be helpful feedback as well. So with that, I'll stop and let the last questions of me if you have. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Exciting discussion. So we're going to start with just questions from the council, then we'll take public comment, and then we'll come back to the council for further discussion. Any questions to start us off?
Well, one is there were some, you talked about the opportunity to speak. Is that just their 3 minutes, or were we going to give them an opportunity to kind of get to know more about maybe those public-private offerings or understandings vision?
I think typically through the public comment, I think the council can ask questions that can help them elaborate on any sort of programming that you may.
Okay.
And I think it might also make sense this is the first discussion of many, and I think maybe it'll make sense at a future discussion as this progresses to actually have age-friendly present.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard because it's questions, but in looking at did you reach out to Town Center as well? As just another question, because they have pop-up leases that are subsidized and harder to rent, like retail environments in that facility. And they have motivation to create gathering spots that create community conditions that bring people to that center every day, right? So I don't know if you've looked at that or not.
No, and really, I haven't started
Yeah.
really a search. It's been the one space was brought to my attention, so I said, "Hey, I'll take a look, go check it out." But beyond that, I
Right.
haven't.
So on that, I think in previous dialogues, sometimes when the town sponsors things, it makes it available that maybe a private entity would qualify for grants and other things, versus not having them affiliated with the town, right? Is that some of the synergies that could happen in the town becoming involved instead of it just being a private enterprise, right? You don't have to, or you can say you could come back with if you don't know the answer to the question, that's something that I think there are things that can happen. I think maybe even the original mandate for and this is to Patty, right? Like the funding you got for age-friendly Corte Madera was also sponsored by the town. Is that correct? No, it was not. That was, but I have seen.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's opportunities for going, basically applying for grants in collaboration with nonprofit organizations,
Right.
or the town doing so on behalf of a program or operation.
So I mean, is that what, when we talk about exploring options, is that some of it or one of the different options that we could say, that sounds great, why wouldn't we want to do that, right?
Sure. I think when it comes to sort of funding and costs associated with developing any sort of program dedicated to, and it's maybe helpful in understanding the vision of what the program is, but certainly, and I think we do that, we can do that today, and we would certainly explore all opportunities to sort of supplement and support the costs associated with operating a program like this. And we could sort of hopefully rely on, I know I was at a conference recently with AARP, and I know the gentleman who knew Patty, but talked to me about sort of some of the grants that they actually have in this space. So, there's opportunities. I'm not sure how lucrative or likely they are to, we're not going to have an answer like we're going to get that funding through this next phase, but we can certainly identify potential opportunities.
So one of the other questions I have is, I've dealt with a lot on TAM, right, related to senior transport and that type of thing, right? Is that something the town, if there was a senior center to get that we could help, move people to and from, if they don't have their own means, and is that the kind of is that one of the relationships that we would want to or could explore?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're even before that, though, in sense of just trying to get to establish something that exists, and what that is going to take. And I'm not saying, I want the next phase, I'm going to come back and say, hopefully have some options, and we're going to talk about what it's going to take to develop something and the costs associated with it. Once that is established, there's going to be a time period to even, get something established and developed and constructed, likely. And then you start to work on all those relationships and how to really fill it out over the course of establish it as a sustainable entity. Can start to really work on those sorts of issues.
Right. And to that point, my other question to you would be, we have a couple different ways in which the town is providing senior services now or interacting with the senior community, right? So that includes other boards and commissions and reviews. In discussing this, do you have, is that determined yet, or is it a question of how do we determine all the different participants and feedback mechanisms to help inform the best solutions, right? Is that Parks and Rec? How many different other groups and entities would we engage with?
That's a great question. I think that speaks to sort of what is it that we're trying to create. And certainly, I know Patty can speak to this. Age-friendly Corte Madera right now has a large survey out to every resident, I think 60 and over in Corte Madera, seeking feedback. Oh, there you go.
I think she provided that to the council to create purview.
Amenities and whatnot. And then Tim, I think, can speak to sort of some of the services we're currently providing through Park and Rec, and have those conversations, the type of conversations you have with the commission there in terms of, and I should mention actually one thing that reminded me, this idea was essentially one of the three items that got elevated out of the Park and Rec Commission prior to the workshop, the strategic planning workshop, and coming to the strategic planning workshop with those. And so that's how it got on the work plan. And then it was discussed and sort of, basically reinforced by the council at the workshop. So,
And we were heavily lobbied.
go ahead. But Tim can speak to some of that.
So I think, we have a wide variety of programs. Obviously, some we inherited from intergenerational when they closed, and some of the instructors we had and some of the same progress we had. And then we've added new programs. But as I said, the challenge is the large room at the community center is challenging because some of the smaller, more intimate classes are hard in that big room. So we have something every day, and we work with Patty constantly on either new instructors or new ideas that they want to see, and very excited to see what comes out of the survey, because what's your current count? You said the survey 733 of people who have given survey, which is great. And that's why we partnered to say, let's get the word out. They come to us. We meet at Pat every Monday. We give the survey. So we're very excited about the survey to enhance what we're already programming, just finding a space that works for both what's currently there and we want to expand, and everything else is already in program. So we're just excited to see what happens.
Thank you.
Great. Rosa?
Thank you. So my question is still around what it was at the last time we talked about this, is that it's figuring out the what, and then you can figure out the how. So I see with what you have already happening for seniors through the rec center, and what I want to know is how much more do you want to add, and then that'll help us figure out what facilities we need. So I don't know if that information is coming from the survey, or if you have a vision of, where you want the rec center to take that.
Well, I think the most updates information will come from the survey. Absolutely. I think you always want to enhance programming. It's just when you're out of space, you really can't program more.
Exactly.
So we have a dance studio that's not a great programming space. We have some classes there, but it's not a great space to have active adult programming, where we program the other class that we can in the rec center that fit. But otherwise, people they don't want the big, large room. They want a more intimate, small space to have a reading group or a knitting group, or it's small, that we already partner with the Lions Club or the Women's Club to provide some of those activities. But there are other people who also want to take those same activities. There's not a space for it. So I think you always want to enhance your programming in all of your activities. I just think that there was definitely a void when the intergenerational closed and needed to be reopened in some form. And I think that's what we're trying to get out of the information from the survey and from the feedback.
Right. And so, so I think I'm what I'm sort of wanting to know is, how many rooms do you think you're going to need? And how big do those rooms need to be? And I know that's all coming, but I find that it's harder to sort of pick an option when it's like, how big, how much do we need? It's kind of I don't know if I'm sticking on that point too much at this point.
No. I think you're looking at like two standard classroom space, like the portables we have that we currently share at Neil Cummins are multi-use portables that are a good size to have a class or even a small exercise class. But on something larger, we have a large meeting, the main hall works for that. So I think you want a flexibility to have either one big large room that can be knocked down into two smaller rooms, or two small rooms that are dedicated for either like an active area and a more passive area. So that's set up so people feel welcome. There's already set up ready to go. They already know what's going on. But I think two classroom spaces, and you can obviously survey back from Patty will tell you that of regular programs, they know, hey, every Monday I can drop in and there's going to be a bridge going on from this time to this time, or there's a chair yoga class from this time to this time on Tuesdays, where it's a regular schedule so people can kind of plan their days around, which they do right now with an exercise class on a Monday or a chair yoga class on a Wednesday, and they plan around that, and they tend to go to different centers for different things right now. I would say two classroom spaces would be ideal for programming for going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I have some questions. Fred, do you want to?
Okay.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about here, and I really think that following this, maybe a workshop might be in order where we can really take the time to really hammer out all the different options and what they would mean. Because, my question is just on the four options, starting with the portables, would we be allowed to use those during the day as a senior facility if we wanted to? Would the schools allow that? I don't know. The backside of Park Madera Center, yes, the dance room is too small by itself, but if we could buy out the lease of the guy next door, the exercise guy, we'd have a nice little enough space down there to have one big exercise room and then two or three smaller rooms, which was what was so great about the 645 Tamalpais property, which was sort of sent to us by divine intervention after Joni Vaughn's funeral service. I pulled out of there and thought, I need to turn left. I don't know why, and I did. And I saw this for lease sign right next to the funeral home, and I laughed. I thought, that's Joni Vaughn's sense of humor right there. Let's put the senior facility right next to the nursing home. But I pulled into the parking lot and I saw this facility that felt like it could be a little, like almost like a single family home for our senior community. And that's what I think they're going for, is their own home, their own piece of space where they can gather and build the community that they want to build, and that they started to build before they got so darn popular, they got thrown out. But wait, this is questions. So I have a question about the portables, about looking at the backside of Park Madera Center. We have that old property there. You could build an L-shaped like outdoor pavilion on that end there and open it to the park and create an amazing space for seniors. We sort of walked that, Patty and I did. I think 71 Casa Buena looks awesome, right next to Pete's and right across from the library. That might be even better. I love that that's available. The other question is how to do the legwork on all this. I would assign the town's realtor. I know you have a leasing agent. Tell him to find you the best property and negotiate for it, because I think if I was your realtor, that's what I would be doing. And that's my only question, right?
That was a question?
You caught me.
All right, Fred, questions, please. Show us how it's done.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Didn't get carried away. I'm sorry.
How many programs right now do we have for seniors? Because when I went on the website, there's like maybe 5 at the most.
I have to count. You'd have to give me a second to count.
No problem.
On the survey? Oh, no.
Just rough idea.
So there's 11 regularly scheduled classes between fitness, yoga, ARP, senior lunch, bingo. Regularly throwing a watercolor class at the watercolor class at the dance studio. There's a lot of regularly scheduled classes that are always there.
Okay, do you have any plans for this upcoming year to increase that program?
Yes, in the fall we do. Yes.
To just rough idea.
Right now it's searching for instructors. We're currently trying to find a Mahjong instructor, which is really popular, another bridge instructor. A lot of times, unfortunately, they don't want to teach. And then unfortunately, what they have to go through to get a business license and get insurance to teach is very cumbersome for somebody who's not going to make a lot of money on a class we don't charge a lot for because they don't make a lot of money teaching that class.
Right.
We've been lucky with a couple instructors who will do it for low income and not like make a lot of money. And like the charity class Monday, Wednesday has been very, very popular. I think she's averaging about 25 to 30 people every time she has the class. But a lot of them it's just cumbersome to teach the class for the amount of money they're going to make.
Okay, and then funding for those programs, is that coming out of the sales tax override money? Because I think there's a line item in there for youth and senior programs. And if so, do you know how much is going to Park and Rec for senior programming? He loves me when I give him the financial, asking financial questions. I don't mean to put you on the
We're
spot.
going to preview for our April meeting where we're going to get into the Park and Rec budget, but there is a certain amount of money, and I'm not exactly sure that I'm not going to throw out the number right now, that does get basically allocated from the sales tax Measure F funds to the Park and Rec department. And actually, we're working on the accounting for that, making sure that it shows up that way. But it's in the range of like tens of thousands and maybe the low 20 to $30,000 range. And it was primarily for staff who were devoted to basically
Correct.
operating that. And so it's not specifically assigned other than that, it's really the Park and Rec budget, which is supporting overall, classes and programs, other staff, because it's hard to just basically separate out just a senior program if it's a class 2 days, 2 hours a day versus the entire rest of the time that staff is doing.
Okay, as this progresses, if we can get more information on going back on the sales tax override, what we budgeted and what we've actually spent on that line item, because I think in the past, if I can remember, I think there's money that's been left on the table.
Oh, yeah. No, there has.
Right, but I think this that'll help us when we go through these scenarios, if we're looking at staffing or providing funding.
Well, the whole funding, yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I think that's going to be, again, the next phase we'll get into sort of, we don't even, want to get a sense of what costs and what options are. And ultimately this will be a conversation about dollars, but absolutely, I think this would have to be a conversation of using some of the sales tax Measure F funds and not using it for other potential infrastructure needs that are basically our program for that.
So that would have to be balanced out based upon what we're supposed to be using that money for, not specifically for CIP projects, but also for you.
It's for all of it.
Right, that's what I'm saying though.
Yep.
Okay. I thought we were looking, most of the stuff I thought in our strategic planning, we're looking at seniors, I'll just say senior center for lack of better words. The word intergenerational starting to pop up. Are we looking at seniors or are we looking at intergenerational where if we did do something, take over whatever space, we're looking at doing kid programming also, not just senior? And then how does that relate back to Park and Rec, what they're doing?
I think that's a great, and we'd love feedback on that. I mean, I think obviously intergenerational is popping up because, I think originally we were working and talking about age-friendly Corte Madera and Patty's work. That with, Carla obviously was involved with the intergenerational center. So I don't have, this is maybe an opportune time to sort of hear about what the vision is for the space in terms of who it's for. And if there's feedback on that from the council, that will help us with next steps.
Okay, I'll save that for comments, but does that affect you at all for what you're doing on the kids side?
No, we just make sure we don't double program.
Okay, I just want to make sure that there wouldn't be any crossover. And I noticed there's no cost estimates. I think it's down the road for any of this stuff. What's the timing on all this? I know it's one of these things where I think.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
no, and I think that's, again, the next phase, there's going to be different, what would be helpful, and going back to my last question was like, what criteria is really most important from the council? If timing is the most critical aspect, I can tell you likely a private space is going to likely be a little bit easier and quick to sort of maneuver around and versus a process of reconfiguring town-owned property potentially. And I don't know, that's just sort of my gut feeling. But again, that is going to require further exploration if timing is the number one category. And so I do envision if, let's say, all three of these sort of options end up being requested to sort of explore all three of them, you know, there's a number of different criteria, and sort of you can envision a matrix much the same way we did with sort of the parking lot master plan, where you have timing, cost, other factors that are weighed against different options, and you come out with sort of a which one is preferred based on all those different criteria that you're highlighting as important.
Okay. 71 Casa Buena, do you know how big that space is square footage wise?
I think it's
Approximately.
approximately 2,000.
Okay, and 2,000 is in the ballpark of what we would need?
Well,
And I'm just asking that.
I think again, some of this is getting and this is important because I think, you know, part of it is it would be helpful to know if we're working in partnership with age-friendly Corte Madera and age-friendly solutions, there's a vision there in terms of what they believe is sort of the ideal amount of space to actually accommodate a certain amount of programming. You know, Tim, I don't know if we had a perfect world, if how much space would actually, you know, would be nice to have. And again, it gets back to the question of actually what are we programming it for? There's obviously classrooms. I know there's an idea of gathering space, of just like creating a place for people to go that feels welcoming and social. I think about when I heard about this, you know, I think about my experience, and I think I met, you know, back in Brooklyn where they would have like social clubs down on the ground floor of the brownstones most of it was, my neighborhood was older, you know, Italian members of the community where people would hang out and really be engaged with what was going on the street, inside, outside, you know, and so on. So you know, there's different models, there's different things that you can envision, and it's a little bit hard to say without sort of, again, having the vision of what we're trying to create. And so this came from sort of our work plan. I think we're just having an open dialogue about what that vision we want to is, and it would be great to get feedback on that. I think you walk through some of these spaces, you can imagine some of these spaces creating, having classroom. I think what Tim said was classroom space as well as more of an open area. And you're obviously going to have certain facilities, whether, you know, bathroom facilities, restroom facilities, and functional facilities as well. Maybe a small kitchen of some sort.
Okay, one last one. I know we keep talking about partnering, but is there the possibility semi-partnering? Basically, we contract for services. So in other words, I'm making this up, okay? We lease the space, we do the improvements or work that out, and then we basically contract with Age Friendly to provide them funding to run that facility.
Yeah, that's, I think, the second option I sort of laid out was trying to figure out, you know, and come to some agreement around that. That would be one approach. And of course, that would be the next phase of actually discussing what that looks like.
Okay. Amy's looking.
So
No,
You know, I would say that each of these options raise certain legal issues. I'm certain that the legal issues can be solved, but you know, each comes with them. And so I think, you know, to the extent that council can sort of narrow things down, you know, that's to an advantage, whether it's at this meeting or the next one. So, you know, these are all the factors we'd have to look at. So it's not just physical space, but it's ownership, leasing, who has control, do we have adequate protections for the town's investment? You know, there's all those boring legal things that we will have to think about.
I agree. I don't think they're so boring because they're important. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Fred. Another question from Charles?
Yeah, sorry, part of it is this is a little open format, so questions. So, for example, if you're having a hard time getting, you know, teachers, that's a public-private, and this isn't related to this stakeholders that are bringing their vision, right? But like say the Avalon is already having a mahjong class for their live-ins, right? Can the town negotiate opening that up and through like paid kind of or just signed up people also have them attend, and that way they create that kind of senior so I mean that or the other one I haven't heard mentioned, and it's to Adam's point about the old brownstone approach, like around Minky Park there's a lot of spaces as well, right? Like they all hang out and then go play bocce in Minky Park or whatever, right? Like kind of vision. And then I start thinking about Minky Park. There's a lot of already classroom spaces there for children. There's two of them, right? And are children there during the day? No, they're in school. So like the other one is like, is there opportunities, not just to the portables, but just like creating that in ideal locations for people to gather, right? Is what I'm interested in general. But
I mean, my personal, that's a little bit more challenging to manage, just if they're in scattered locations. So, I mean, obviously having one space that's consolidated would be
and I guess so that's what I'm struggling with is ultimately we provide a lot of different senior services across the board. And it is this going to consolidate and make it a combined thing that is city run about really providing comprehensive senior services across a certain spectrum? Or is this specific to a Parks and Rec, right? And that's, I don't see the definition of that for a town's interest, right? Like I can see maybe there's visions and it's not only that piece that we should be discussing.
Yeah, I think, well, look, one of the things is if we were doing this solely on our own, obviously we're looking at additional staff time and energy needed to devote to this. And so one of the advantages I think of working with individuals that are already in the space essentially and that are passionate about this is that you sort of have additional resources to devote to sort of building that out. And that's where I do see some synergy there, obviously, with working with and that can apply to our nonprofit stakeholders who devote in their time and care about the aging, population in town, and it can apply to people who are advocating for a fair house, a host of things. And so that's a nice way to actually just build our capacity as a town without actually devoting more resources to staff time and whatnot. And so that's where I think, obviously, that's where this sort of, I know it's amorphous and we're sort of wide open conversation, but there's the connection, I think, naturally between where I come at this from and age-friendly Corte Madera. And
I mean, and the other one is if it's town facilities, right? Like, would we enter into a contract with a group about the time of occupation, and we'd have to define that, and it could be taken away or whatever, right? But like private, if ultimately there's some kind of what if it could be
agreement? It would be a very we'd have an agreement worked out, and so that's the next phase of work if we go down this road is we'd have to look into those parameters.
Okay. Yeah, because so I mean that was part of it before as the town shuttered it, right? Like you can't do that if it's not town property, it's up to the institution and that kind of thing. So I just it's hard to understand what would be the right path and in not hearing everything that's the specifics of them right now.
Yeah,
so more of that specificity helps.
Right. I think it's just that's why I sort of couch this as like a check-in, and do we want to engage further in this sort of path forward?
Did you have any information? No. All right. I've just got one. I was going to just confirm that this is intended to be an intergenerational center, not just a strictly senior thing. And Fred already asked that, so thank you, Fred. My only other question is the vision that this would be a space where both age-friendly and Parks and Rec would be bringing programming. And so to the extent that Parks and Rec has programs already set that would be appropriate for an intergenerational center that they might move in there too, or is that all just totally up for discussion right now?
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't even, yes,
Okay,
I think that's open for discussion and certainly could make sense. Yeah.
okay,
Touch it that way.
great. All right, I have no other questions. Any other questions from council members? All right, so at long last, we will open this up to public comment. You have been so patient. Thank you, Patty. So we're gonna open this item up for public comment. If you'd like to speak, please go ahead and head to the podium after Patty's gonna speak here first, and then anyone's welcome to speak after her, and then we'll go to Zoom after. So if you're on Zoom and you'd like to speak, please raise your hand via Zoom so that Lorena knows and we can bring you on. We'll do 3 minutes apiece, and we'll start with Patty.
Thank you. One of the questions came up about intergenerational versus multi-generational, which is where you have kids playing over here. And I think a great example was our makerspace, where you had the young teens and older teenagers helping the old people learn how to use the plastic machines, whatever those things were. And so that's the kind of intergenerational we're talking about, not having something for the little kids over here and something for the old people over here. It's really, also we had reading to preschoolers, where an older person was reading to preschoolers. Okay. In 2015, the rec catalog had nothing for older adults or seniors or anything. We started age-friendly Corte Madera in 2015, and we started the Intergenerational Center in 2018. About 6 months later, you'll see what we had going on. I sent around an image of what the program looked like, and it was just filled up every day through Thursday, and then we went to Friday too. And at the peak, which was in your staff report, was the multi-page catalog that had the different descriptions of all of the classes. So I hope you got a chance to look at that. And that was when we hit our peak. We were like the gold standard of age friendlies in Marin, and it was all terrific. And I also gave you the current page that the rec department is showing. The cost is one of the big problems, and I believe there's $100 adult scholarship per year. But for instance, pickleball is $200 for 4 lessons, so it's a little off there. We had someone who was a prior instructor for chair exercise, and she wanted to teach, and we approached the rec department recently, and they said nothing is available until fall. Well, not in terms of time, in terms of space. So when Adam and Carla and I met, he wanted to know about other senior programs, and in Mill Valley, active adults are $25 a year. Novato has the Margaret Todd Center, Ross Valley Seniors, Marin City has the Margarita Johnson Senior Center, Edgewater Seniors, and Sausalito. And I also looked at comparably sized towns in Sonoma. Cloverdale, which is this one that I gave you guys a copy of as well, that is $20 a year. And Healdsburg, $15 a year, totally from their TOT. And Sebastopol, that has a population only 7,000, has a senior center, and that's $50 a year. So please remember that 1/4 of the people in town are seniors. And when you're standing in line at Safeway, if there's 4 people in front of you, one of them is a senior. Please make it happen. I'm turning 77 this year, and I would like to see it in my lifetime.
Thanks so much, Patty. Who else would like to speak here tonight? Carla?
Mayor Beckman, council members and staff. So good to see all of you. Anyway, Patty, thanks for taking some of the comments I was going to make so I can talk a little less. Anyway, next month, it will mark the 6th anniversary of the opening of the Intergenerational Center. We've been told it's not going to be sustainable. It's just not going to work. We put a deal, voluntary membership for a year, $25. You can come to every class we have Or if you don't want to donate the $25, don't bother. We didn't charge for a single class. They were all free. Everything was free. I worked and got grants and donations that paid generously to our instructors, because the instructors that I hired were all professional in their field. As a result, we had retention that the instructors that started 6 years ago are still the instructors for the same programs, and they've built a following. And so, I mean, I was really excited in our watercolor class that we started with Deborah Maddox, who is just a real accomplished artist. When we had to relinquish our space at the rec center, I transitioned everything to Zoom. We thought that we we're going to lose members. Instead, the programs grew and grew and grew. For example, on yesterday, there were 30 people in watercolor. So it's just so wonderful. The people not only have developed interests, but there's this connectivity. And it has so reduced the isolation of seniors, but the art is open to any age. So we sometimes have grandkids that come. We had a little 4-year-old come twice last week, just so intent on following along and doing his wonderful creation. It was just, it's wonderful. When we had COVID, went on transition to Zoom, it was the perfect time to open the programs up, not just to Marin, but then people would get their sister in Texas to participate, or in Oklahoma or Vermont or Florida. Oh, so anyway, we have really reduced isolation. I hope you looked at what was in your deal, the catalog that I put out. You can see all the activities. The whole thing was just, I could do it with the encouragement of the people that really appreciate it. And I was so much more. So I think, yes, Pat, we need a workshop.
Thank you so much. All right, next speaker, please.
My name is Richard Kalish. I live up on Edison, and I've been a senior for a long time. So I'm a senior, very experienced senior. I thought that Council Member Thomas made a very good point, and that is figure out what the program is, what the needs are, and then you can determine how much and the type of space you need to accommodate those programs. Analogy I use is there's a fire over on the other side of town. How many fire engines should we send? And the answer is, who knows? How big's the fire? Then we know. So what's the program? Then we know the space that needs. Another point I want to make is you go to the park, there's a wonderful skateboard park for the kids. There's a outstanding kiddie play area that's divided into 2 parts for the really small kids and a little bit older kids. This is wonderful. This is part of the city's mission to provide these facilities for an important segment of the city. You look through that pamphlet of classes and things that are available. Another one came in the mail just last week or this week. There's a real paucity of activities available for seniors. And I think it's part of the city's mission to be sure that important segment, which is 25% of the city, that the needs of that part of the population are similarly provided for. That's the city's not a profit-making organ. It's got a mission. and serving the needs of the different segments of the population are that mission. And so for that reason, and I'm not sure, there's real agreement here, but I don't think it should be a public-private partnership. I think it's a part of the public responsibility to take care of the needs of the seniors. We know that a major problem in the country is the isolation and loneliness among seniors. And that's we should, with a population of seniors as large as ours is, that's something I think the city should get hold of. And as to the partnership, the age-friendly Corte Madera is a valuable, indispensable asset in working with the city to address the needs of the seniors. So, but as to the financing, I think it's the city's responsibility to provide this. And finally, I also want to endorse Councilmember Ravazio's idea of a workshop. I think could be extremely useful for this. So
Great. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
I'm a rather newish member of Age Friendly Corte Madera, and I appreciate everybody's time and willingness to work with us. We have lots of ideas, I would like to say one thing, and I just want to read something very short, less than a minute, I hope. I feel personally that we cannot absolutely say for sure what we want, what we will do, and what we need. What we need is a space that will give us an opportunity to see what we can pull in. And you'll see what happens, like Carla said, once people start to see what we have, they'll go, oh my gosh, we could use this, and then we can build on it. So what we need is maybe the equivalent of 2 classroom spaces, but we need to work in conjunction with the town for sure. And I believe that we can build on it if we just get a place and some general ideas to start. 2 days ago in the Chronicle, woman Robin Caruso, Chief Togetherness Officer at Anthem Blue Cross, wrote an article. Read 2 things. Last year, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an advisory calling loneliness and isolation an underappreciated public health risk. According to the advisory, in 2018, only 16% of Americans felt connected to their local community. And there seems to be little differences in loneliness rates between men and women. And also the death rate of people suffering from loneliness is much higher, as she explains that. Adults may, anyway. And by fostering a sense of community, we can positively impact the lives of older Americans and provide help and connection to ensure that no one is left to face the challenges of loneliness on their own. I thought that was a nice coincidence to have this yesterday in the paper. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in person tonight who would like to give public comment? And seeing none, we'll go ahead and take public comment via Zoom. Do we have any hands up, Lorena?
One hand raised from Christine O'Sullivan.
Perfect.
Christine, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you can see me or not, but I'll just speak. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I have been working with the age-friendly Corte Madera and age-friendly solutions for the past 7 years. And I just want to acknowledge that the momentum that Patty and Carla and the whole team has created has been astounding. Not only did we have the best senior programming in the county, we had such an attractive, bright, friendly place. And I think people felt pretty cool going there. And I believe we had the first intergenerational effort in the county. So one of the things I want to say is that let's not stop at just the senior center. People have been doing that for 60 years. You know, I really think intergenerational is important to maintain. I echo Patty's comment that it should be intergenerational, meaning older and younger, in various instances, not just older or just younger. Obviously, there's certain things that have to be just older, just younger, but anyway, the growth that children in this area who don't have grandparents nearby, they really gained a lot from this. And the older adults seeing those children, it just brings out the youth in them. It's beautiful. And I think we just want to we want to acknowledge that we have tested this concept. It was wildly successful. Someone has contributed, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but several $100,000 thanking us for what we've created and asking for it to move forward. So I think we should leverage these learnings and the vision and the creativity of this particular group and do this soon while we have the, and then I think you guys should enjoy your retirement and let the town carry it on. And so I do agree with that. And yeah, instead of being behind the curve, I think we should be at the forefront as we were a few years ago. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other hands up for public comment via Zoom?
We do not. And just for the record, we do now.
Okay.
From Susie Beatty, but just for the record, we did have emailed public comment, no additional emailed public comment. And it was uploaded to the website and available for the public.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Susie, whenever you're ready.
Hi. Do you, pardon me, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I didn't really have a plan to speak tonight. I wanted to hear what you guys were talking about. I am familiar with what Patty and Carla are hoping for. And I do have to say that I am pleased with things that are going on at the rec center. I think the recreation department is doing some things for seniors that are really good. I love the idea of there being a place where people can go, seniors particularly, this thing of the loneliness and so forth, where people can go at any time and probably see friends, have a cup of coffee, have a tea, talk and visit, maybe go get some cards and play at any time. That's the only problem with the rec center situation, is that there's specific classes, which are great. And, I'm sure they could happen also at a designated place. But I think that idea is going to probably pan out if the town has enough money to do it in some cooperative way with, with the organization. So I'd love to see something like this happen. I think some of the suggestions of the places are great. And I'd like to leave things at the rec department the way they are, because I think having the people there is good. I love the idea of it being in a building, a place where people will always know where to go, kind of a permanent spot. And little towns have these, so little cities have them. So maybe we can work it out. And that's all. Thanks for everybody's input into this.
Great. Thank you, Susie. Any other hands up, Lorena?
No additional hands raised.
Okay, and I don't see any other folks here who haven't spoke yet and would like to speak in person. So we'll go ahead and close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council for discussion. A reminder, our goal here is just to give high-level direction to staff about which of the three options presented, which of the three sort of models for how to make this space happen. We're most interested in investigating further.
Can you bring those back up on that slide or those questions?
4 options.
Yeah,
Or options, so we can.
great. Yeah, thank you, guys. I'm gonna ask.
So in the staff report, if anybody has.
Great. I'm going to ask Rosa, our most concise council member, to start us off. She has gotten to speak the least so far on this item.
I could make a joke about people with the last name Thomas, but anyway, I won't be concise, not saying much. So I think that one of the things I'm interested in is how this was done before, what was the financial breakdown, and whose responsibility it was when it was everything was in the rec center. And it's just that I just don't know. I'm sure that information is out there, out there somewhere. I just haven't gotten it. Haven't found it myself. I understand that there are monies from age-friendly Marin. Is that where the monies are? And I don't know how those monies could or would help with this program. Also, so there was space for, compared to what you have now, how much more space and how much more time was devoted to the intergenerational center? I'm trying to get an idea of where we are now and where we used to be and how that could change.
So basically where our staff offices now, there was one large room that they broke down into two rooms, correct me if I'm wrong, Patty. And then where my office is now was a maker space that they used on a regular basis. And then they have I only have the last calendar they did, but it was programmed on a regular basis with classes and activities. So just take what we have there to the outside of the main hall of a bridge taking up a main part of the room, or senior lunch taking up a section, or cherry yoga taking up a section. So square footage is hard to compare. But they did have that room programmed Monday through Friday with classes and activities.
Right. But prior to that, was your office at the town hall or where?
From what I was told, the offices were in the back of the green room of the community center.
Got it.
That's what they were to.
Okay.
Right. For that 2-year period, they were in the back of the green room.
Okay. And that's no longer available.
No, it's currently a storage unit and part of where we store all our supplies.
Okay. So then also, I'm sorry, I'm asking questions when I know I should be making comments.
You're allowed to ask questions as well. So
Okay.
you just don't do comments at question time, but you can do questions or comments at comment time.
Great, I learned something. So what I'm just trying to figure out is, how there's no way to go back to in the space that there used to be. There's no way to return to that arrangement. Okay, all right. So we have to do something. We have to come up with alternative space.
We have to get back the bench.
Yeah, right. Or move the bench to wherever it ends up being, right? Because now that's how everybody finds it. It's the iconic bench. Okay, so, I guess just as a comment, I think that the idea of a walk-in sort of, club sounds interesting that Susie was talking about. I know when I was a kid back in Delaware, we had this really cool place for teenagers called Miss Juanita's. And just she and her husband ran this place. And if kids got out of line, either one of them would kick them out, but you could buy some sandwiches and a cookie and put money in the jukebox and dance. And that was our social thing. And, you could do that until you maybe were 17 and then you'd go off to some other cooler place. But it sounds like that would be great, but I could see how that could be very, very difficult to manage legally. But I think that's an interesting thing to explore. And I guess just you were really clear about probably, and they were clear too, that maybe a couple of classrooms are what we need. So I guess we need to look at all of these and figure out how could you get 2 reasonably sized rooms that could accommodate different activities. What would be the most cost-effective, least legally risky way of doing that? So that's my very undefined answer.
Thank you. Let's go to Fred next.
Thanks. One follow-up question. I'll get a comment on that. If we got 2 portables, do you know what the cost of portables are? No idea at all. Because what are we paying for the one that RJ has in the parking lot? It will not be the same. Just a rough idea.
I think that's maybe 17,000 a month.
17 a month. Okay.
Classic says.
Okay, it costs money then. I'm just trying to get a rough idea. Thanks. I have a few comments. I agree with what Richard says. I think it's the town's responsibility to be providing services to it's not just seniors, but it's residents in general. And I think for us to sit there and push that off, like in this third option, to push it off on age-friendly, sitting there saying, you guys go lease a space and then we'll help you. To me, I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's on the town, again, to be providing services to all its residents. I think we've been lacking since we came out of COVID of providing those services to seniors. You can tell because we only have we have, not that many programs dedicated to seniors. When I look at what Age Friendly was doing in 2018 compared to what we're doing now, they're completely on the different spectrums. I came in here with the mindset that we should be doing due diligence, looking at all these options. I'm changing my mindset. I actually think we should be going with us looking at leasing space with the town. I'll be blunt about it. I think that by the time we try to figure out facilities at the community center, the dance studio, it's my understanding from what I heard tonight, is too small. That basically leaves trying to partition off the bar area, which I don't even know if that can be done. Sound walls, you'd have to figure out a separate entrance. I just think it's just too much trouble. I just going to take too much time too. So I'm going towards, I think we need to look at leasing space. I don't know about 71 Casa Buena only because of the sense that I think the parking in that area is limited because of Pete's Coffee, unless it's like after they close or something like that. The only couple this with, and I'll be honest with Patty and Carla, I don't think Age Friendly has the financial wherewithal for a lease, for the insurance provides. I just don't think they have the financial wherewithal for that. I know you have a chunk of money right now. I think there could be the possibility, just to get this out there, if the town maybe can look at getting grant money from Age Friendly to help with the build out. And I should say it's maybe giving the naming rights. Again, some of this stuff has to be worked out, but I think that would help the town at least fund the build out part of it. And I'm more in favor of, I call it a contract for services. When I start thinking partnership, I don't know what that looks like. I know there's legal issues. Does it start getting convoluted? Is the town providing staffing? Is that staffing sitting in a space that's not owned by the town, but yet Age Friendly is in charge? It starts getting convoluted. If it's a flat out contract for services, the town is going to Age Friendly, sitting there saying, we're contracting for you for these services. Here's what you're getting on an annual basis or yearly basis. I also agree with Rosa, what Susie has said. I always envision this has more, couple of different ways. One is a hangout type place. If I just want to go in the morning, you have a little breakfast bar, there's some couches, I can read the paper, small little library. If I want to gather with friends, board games, and then, the regular senior programming. And I'm going the direction of intergenerational also, as long as it can be worked out with Park and Rec, that there's no conflict and that we're not, going on each other's shoes. And I think also by doing intergenerational, it'll create efficiencies within that center. I don't think the center, I'm just calling the center for now, it should be a thing where it's only open 3 hours a day. I'm not saying it has to be open 10 or 12, but it should be open for longer periods of hours that can serve more people. And I think there's efficiency there. I'm sure, Tim, you're looking at programming also, same problem with kids, right? Or youth. Community center is one big room and that's it. So I think that's all my comments. Again, I just want to get the direction I'm going, but again, completely different mindset than what I walked in with.
Thanks, Fred. That's really helpful. Let's go to Charles.
My aunts took those online courses when they first went on, one from Cloverdale, and then she shared it with her sister over in Rio Vista. So I know exactly what they're talking about. I remember talking to Carla many years ago with the Intergenerational Center. It's like my wife was teaching over at Mill Valley, and there they have shared classrooms where they're both teaching preschool and at the same time having it open to seniors and everything. And so I remember the vision from the get-go. I didn't have time to go in and see, how populated it was. Like in my questioning, I was leading towards, I don't know the right answer, or like, to me, to find the best solution is to leave options open, right? And really understand how it what those benefits are and the synergies, right? And the thing I've heard from staff is they would very much like to have this group, work on figuring that out and make proposals and try to, and some of them have government experience at the town, and others are some of the best contributors to public comment. So I value that kind of understanding. So to me, is a workshop, or if it's, what needs to be determined to move this forward, but the substance behind it to really be able to provide it has to come from people, right? Other than just us, and really understand tangible kind of something that we could grab a hold of and support, right? And so how do we get there? It could be any of those three. And I'm not one to devalue one because I don't understand all the financials to her point, about it yet. So I guess, I don't have enough gray to really understand what's best for all the seniors right now in those three options. And I think that, just from what I understood before, I had concerns about the community center, because now it sounds like that's not really an option, right? Park Madera Center sounds like it's not an option. The portables are, right? So I'd say if seniors, that's a good synergy for me. I see grandparents dropping off their kids at Neil Cummins, right? And then they could go and that kind of thing. But to that point, that sometimes maybe it's not available because it is a preschool, right? And it's like after preschool, maybe it could become open again, or it could be, I don't know the programming and but there, it is a shared town space that you would have to share, with all kinds of different groups. The town lease facilities sounds great. I do have, accessibility and that type of thing is a consideration, right? And I know that the Pete's, I agree, there's not that much parking, and it's a very loud space. It's adjacent to the library for sure. The other space, I've been to, there's some other community groups that are over there that do programming and stuff. That they are decent spaces, but it's an older building, right? And it's just it's very car centric still too, right? And I guess I like to think if it's a community based thing, it should be good for seniors to access that, not just by driving a car. As my grandfather aged, he tried to drive everywhere, but I don't know that it was always the best outcome. So, and then, like I said, like the town center or something like that, where if it's really about solving loneliness and creating engagement, right? Like that's the reason that the Bay Club is the anchor tenant of the town center, is because there's a synergy between the Safeway and others being there and creating that kind of community. Maybe that's not the right location, maybe, and so there's so many great opportunities. To just focus on one right now would be, I think, a loss. So that
Would be my idea, though. If you're, can I jump in there maybe?
Are you finished?
I mean, you're right.
Yeah,
like,
finish. I'm sorry.
But the thing is like, I would like it to be everyone's idea. None of them are like, yes, I put together that our community has amazing assets everywhere, right? And it's just whether we want to open them up to seniors in a format that could be utilized. And I like, through the public dialogue, the idea that it could be throughout the day, and that it could go into evening programming and other things that it's much more difficult to do in town facilities, right? And places that are active at night, that have lighting and the parking and that, that kind of thing. So those are only, in the end, I don't care really where it is. It just needs to be the best thing for the seniors if that's what the town's going to support. So yeah, no, so sorry, Eli.
Pat, you got all your comments out.
I
during
do,
questions.
I have, no, I have.
Oh, no. Okay, go ahead.
3 pieces of paper where I've tried to get everything down into smaller bites. I agree that it's the town's responsibility to serve our seniors, especially since they're 20% of our population. And 25, sorry. And also I do think that we should be looking at an expeditious answer. I'm not quite as old as Patty, but I'm getting closer. And I can feel like the what's taking so long kind of question happening all the time. But I think that the money that was bequested, the $300,000, might best be put into an account that's either used to pay rent to the town or to reimburse the town when there are expenses. It should be partnership money that the seniors group puts on the table with the town. And most importantly, I think when we do this workshop, I would love to see us do a little field trip, because after listening to everybody, I'm convinced that 645 Tamalpais is a really great solution, because it does have two larger classroom spaces. Is that drawing I sent you, Adam? Okay, so we've done a little drawing. We walked through with Patty and Carla and kind of figured out that you could do one big exercise room in the front, and then there's a couple of smaller spaces that could be like a kind of lobby or, living room kind of area. And then there's two smaller classrooms. And then there's a big open sunny room that has potential to add a kitchen and an ADU bathroom. It's all on the ground floor. It's all very easy to convert to ADU. And from there, there's a wonderful outdoor patio where they could sit and have coffee and maybe put some nice sailcloth shades on it to make it a nice shady place. And it's much less expensive than the town center would be. The town center is so expensive that really well-run businesses can't make it there. So I don't think that's reasonable, but this space is reasonable and the owner is interested. He loved the idea of a senior center being there. The other tenant that houses the other half of the building is a medical facility, Sunrise Medical. And so this planning has been going on for many years, and you were asking about the programming, and yes, it's true. When you're trying to find a space, you need to know what your program is. But I think that's what they know. That's the proven program that they were running up until COVID hit, and the town decided to bring in new management to Parks and Rec, which is what gave the intergenerational center the heave ho. You were too popular. You ended up being a victim of your own success. And I think it's time to try it again. And in a facility that you can control how many people and what's going on there. And the intergenerational thing, the main way it played out, as I saw, is all of these daycare facilities, of which we have many in Corte Madera, all throughout Madera Gardens, throughout Chapman Park. They push the babies around in the big red carts, and they'd push the babies into the senior center, and they would all sit and hold each other on their laps and read stories. And David Kuhnhart would go in and read for hours, and the toddlers would come and go and cry and poop and leave. And they were all so happy, because you're right. Our lonely seniors often have grandchildren in Boston, and our lonely grandbabies have grandparents in Boston. So it's a really nice way to bring them together. So I want to do everything I can to support it, as you know. And I do think, from hearing everybody's comments, including Parks and Rec, I think Tim raises some really good points that we need to serve. The 75% of the community is not seniors. So we need to make sure we're serving them as well. So it sets it up perfectly that we should have a designated space for the seniors. And I think if we do our little workshop of everybody who's interested in working on it, although we have to watch out for the Brown Act, right? We can't have more than two of us. There is a power of momentum. If we start small and it gets bigger, we can do more. The Marin Civil Grand Jury told every city to do more for its seniors. So I think we have that behind us as a reason. And I think bottom line is, I agree on Casa Buena. If there's not parking, then even if it's a cool space, I don't know, you'd have to park at the library. There's that library space across the road, but if there's no way it's going to have the nice quiet outdoor space that this one does, which I think is a tiebreaker, I think. But overall, I think I want the town leadership, I want Adam and Amy to tell us what we want, what's the best partnership, what's the best legal setup that makes it easy for the town. I attended a thing in Sacramento where there was a really smart town manager who said, the secret to a really smart town is don't do anything. Find people who are experts who want to do it and hire them to do it. So the town's not doing it, but the experts are. But this situation may be different, and maybe the town does want to provide a staff member and then actually run the program. But whatever you guys want, I mean, as long as it works, right? We can, I mean, everybody will work with whatever the town thinks is the best idea. Sorry to ramble on. I think I'm finished. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. All right, I'll just share a few thoughts of my own. First, I just want to address a couple of the speakers who gave public comment. To Richard, I completely agree with you. I think, you know, the town absolutely has a responsibility to provide for residents of all ages, especially seniors. We're doing a fantastic job of that with the programming that we're putting on, but there's always more to be done. We are a small town and we have limited staff bandwidth, and that's why we're so lucky to have volunteers and organizations like Age Friendly who are willing to be a force multiplier and really help us, you know, take those offerings to the next level. So feel incredibly lucky to have that partnership. I also wanted to just speak to Susie Beatty's comment. Completely agree. I think the idea of there being a space for seniors to hang out that is not programmed, you know, 24/7 or not programmed the entire time it's open, and you know, is a space for people to just come and hang out and do whatever they want, I think is a great idea, and I would love to see that be an element of whatever we were ultimately able to do together here. So I think this is a really exciting preliminary discussion. I'm very excited to revive the Intergenerational Center. It's been too long. I was really sad that, you know, COVID kind of gave it the 1-2 punch there, but I'm super excited to bring it back. To me, I think the top priority is that it be intergenerational. You know, I think Pat spoke to it really eloquently, right? I think just that intergenerational element of it, it's better for the younger members, it's better for the older members. It just makes it more enjoyable and makes it a more well-rounded and enriching experience for everyone. So I think my top priority is that it be intergenerational. You know, in terms of the structure, the models that were offered here, like Fred, I came into this pretty agnostic about which of these models seemed like the best path forward. Through the discussion here, I think I've kind of learned community center doesn't seem likely to happen. Park Madera Center, I kind of consider it as an option, but I've never been to the dance studio yet, and it sounds like it's actually really not a good match for what we're looking for. So it sounds like that's not an option. And then portables at Neil Cummins, those things have classes in them from like 8 to 3 every day. So that just blocks off the majority of the time that you want to be putting on intergenerational programming. So I don't see that as an option either. And then in terms of having Age Friendly be the one, jumping down from option 1 to option 3, having Age Friendly be the one to actually rent the space, I don't know that that's the best use of your money. That money might be better spent, you know, on programming and things like that. So, so that kind of leaves me leaning towards option 2, which would be looking for a space that the town can lease and really just partner with Age Friendly to come in and provide that programming and help, you know, get the word out. On that note, I would, you know, I'd love to see like sort of the Age Friendly programming, the programming that Age Friendly like brings and puts together. I'd like to see that sort of dovetailed to whatever extent we think is a good idea with any appropriate intergenerational programming that Parks and Rec is putting on, because I like the idea of all of those programs happening in the same place so that people who are going to these programs, whether it's originated with Age Friendly or whether it originated with the town, it's all kind of a cohesive user experience where you go to one place to enjoy them.
Mayor Beckman, can I get a clarification from staff on one of the things you said?
Yeah.
So can you describe the portables just a little bit more? Because I don't,
Sure.
Did they have classrooms in them? I thought they were town.
So there are 4 portables we use for programming. 2 are used in the daytime for school activities, and then we take them in the afternoon for enrichment classes. The other 2 are programmed with our childcare facility, so both set up for childcare, and they don't have kids in them until after school's done, but they're all set up with all the activities and all the supplies out, and 2 of our staff are housed out of that facility.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. So to me, that kind of still presents the issue of like 2 of them are blocked off during the first half of the day and 2 of them are blocked off during the second half of the day. So I just feel like that might just be more of a headache than it's worth. So yeah, one thing I want to be cautious about with regards to finding a space that we can lease and partner with Age Friendly to put on programming. I just want to be cautious about not putting an excessive amount of tenant improvement funding into a facility that we don't own. So I'd like us to really put our heads together with Age Friendly and figure out what's the most cost effective TI we can do, where we're not really like busting open the piggy bank on this thing, but we're giving them a good facility that they're going to be able to put on, successful programming in. So I'd just like to make sure that we keep a handle on costs there, and value. I think it's been said, and I completely agree. I think it's going to be critical, whatever we do, to have a clear written agreement that really clearly lays out roles and responsibilities between Age Friendly and the town. I think that's an important part of any partnership. So I think we're all on the same page there. It was mentioned, I love the model of sort of voluntary membership where you pay like a voluntary membership fee, but the classes themselves are free. If we're able to somehow integrate any Parks and Rec classes that we're offering at this location with that model, I think that would provide the best user experience, but that's going to be something for us to look into whether that's possible or not. But I like that as a model. I think that is pretty much all that I wanted to say. Any other comments from council members?
One last idea I'd like to mention that they also had that I thought was really smart is the outdoor patio area is right on Tamalpais, a very busy area. To raise money, there are options there. They could sell coffee. They could do like a baked goods concession. The seniors could be entrepreneurs if they wanted to and raise money to help fund the center. But we did talk about saving Patty's money, the bequest money, as some kind of rent insurance or some way that the town has, access to that money if we need it to shut it down, or if it's just not run right or whatever. It's some kind of, I don't know. We got to work out the details of how to finance it for sure, but for another day.
I guess one other benefit, I think, of option 2 of the town leasing the facility and then just basically creating space for Age Friendly to come in and partner with us on programming is our staff has experience doing this. Like we're renting this place that we're in right now. So our staff has experience, renting out commercial spaces and using them for public programming. And I think it would just save Age Friendly's bandwidth if that wasn't like a whole new skill set that you guys had to go out and learn, and you can just focus on the programming, which I think is the most important part.
And quick note on tenant improvements, the owner of 645 Tamalpais does have
I think it's
some
premature to.
but I'm just saying there's walls that were put in that could be taken out.
I think the town attorney wanted to say something.
I think we're just getting into specifics.
too much
of the particular
detail.
property,
Okay.
but that is not.
Got
we
it.
should stay away from it.
Perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay, great. I think we've all given our thoughts on sort of the general models that we've looked at. Does everyone feel like they've gotten their thoughts across? Okay, sounds good. Adam, do you feel like you've got a decent sense of kind of where our heads are at?
No, I'm very pleased and happy with the discussion and with the direction and feedback that I got from the council. So I think we have some good next steps on our plate that we can work on and come back to the council. The next step, I'd come back with actual hopefully maybe it might be a couple of options to consider, but certainly costs are going to be important to consider, and models. I've heard of not only the programming and what that's going to look like, but also obviously the town's involvement from a staffing standpoint, resource standpoint, and then parameters for whatever partnership agreement that we're looking at, and working with Amy Ackerman on that, our town attorney on that, of course. And if we are looking at a lease space, that would require us I would engage our real estate broker who would help me navigate that with the property owners.
Great. Well, thank you, Adam and Tim, for supporting this discussion, and huge thanks to our speakers, especially Patty and Carla, for all the work that you've done on this issue and for participating in the discussion tonight to help us bring the Intergenerational Center back. Great. All right, folks. So we're gonna keep on moving here. We have a long night ahead of us. So we're gonna move on to item 7 here, which is council reports. We're gonna start with the town manager report.
Yeah, just real briefly. One, I just wanted to, for those listening, we are going to have Mayor Beckman and myself will be at the farmers market tomorrow at I think 12 to 2, meeting and greeting folks. So please come down. We'll have
Come on by. Sure.
say hello if you're in the area and chat us up. Secondly, I do want to quickly update the council on the Tamalpais overcrossing project. Just it's been some time as projects with Caltrans are not known for their expediency necessarily, but it's important work that's going on with their project team in terms of actually getting into the traffic engineering and how that will actually work from a design standpoint and from a traffic, most really importantly, from a traffic and transit standpoint as well. They started digging into that really more in depth I would say last fall. RJ, myself, and we have parametrics involved with helping us support us in terms of evaluating the proposals that we've seen. They've gone back and are now going to be reaching out to our team to sort of look at their latest iteration from a design and their traffic engineering that they've been doing on that project. It's still moving forward. It's just now we're sort of actually looking at a 2026 summer construction schedule rather than previously we were looking at 2025. So just an update there. And with that, I'll end my report.
All right. Thank you, Adam. We're going to go to council reports next, and we'll start with Fred.
Thanks. I attended Ross Valley Paramedic Authority meeting there a couple of weeks ago. A couple of things there. We approved doing a deployment study. So that study will collect all the data from the different paramedics that are out there and then figure out the best place to place them and where they should be. We also received a letter from Dan Schwartz, who's a manager in Larkspur. Basically, what that letter says, it looks like Larkspur wants to leave Ross Valley Paramedic Authority and go to Central Marin. A couple of things came up with that. One is there are several, like numerous legal issues that arose out of that. There's numerous operational issues that arose out of that. So I don't think that's going to happen, I want to say anytime soon, like in the next X amount of months. It also ties back to how they gave their tax measure, what they said on their tax measure on their ballot, which goes through, I think, 27. So again, there's a number of issues. There was some commentary on that in the respect that it looks like it did not go through any elected officials. It was a letter that came from Dan Schwartz. So it did not go through Central Marin Fire Council. There's several comments about that. I attended Marin Wildfire Joint Powers Agreement JP Ad Hoc Subcommittee. Last year sometime, Mill Valley actually consolidated their fire department in Central Marin. When they did that, Mill Valley Fire is no longer the taxing authority, which has an effect on the JPA for Marin Wildfire. So it's an ad hoc committee. We're looking at tweaking the verbiage within the JPA. That JPA will go, hopefully it'll go to the Marin Wildfire Board in May, and it'll go out to all the towns and cities that are affected. It's about 15 or 16 different jurisdictions within Marin, because there's fire districts also out in West Marin that it affects, and that needs 3/4 approval. So that'll be coming up sometime, maybe like summer, maybe a little bit later this summer. The good news is for staff, I think that the Marin Wildfire's attorney will write the staff report for the town. And last week, I attended a CMSA meeting. That's it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles.
Nothing to report.
Alrighty. Thank you, Rosa.
Okay, I also attended the RVPMA meeting. It was really interesting. Fred recapped it very well. I also yesterday attended a subcommittee for doing a preliminary rating of the applications to the County of Marin Housing Authority. We'll be awarding about 700, well, there's ask for $770,000 in grant request. We have about 230,000 to give away, and we're working to figure out who gets what. A very interesting rating system that was created, which I'm learning a lot from. I'm sure we might have to adopt it someday for something we need to do because it's really good. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat.
Okay, just a couple things. The Town Hall Art Committee is doing a wonderful thing that everyone's going to really enjoy seeing. There's a sort of historical presentation of the town through photographs that everyone is going to love. We're going to be looking at it on site soon to make sure that we want it everything where we think it's going to be. But the Town Hall project is getting very exciting. Every time I drive by there, it's looking more and more beautiful. Very excited about that. We did host our school superintendent at the Lions Club this week, and he did speak about the need for resource streams to make it possible so that no child gets left outside of our after-school programs. He embraced that term, that phrase when we were saying, hey, we used to we had staff members who had the discretion of just saying, come on in, kid. We know you can't afford it. We know your dad's a drug dealer, whatever. We know you need something, come on in. And now, because we're so much more professional and so much more, together from a business standpoint, we don't have the discretion to do that anymore. So he definitely agreed in our overall idea of sort of going back on Parks and Rec to discuss what is our overall mission and about serving those who need us most first. And then, the kids' soccer enhancement programs and all that kind of come after that. And he was definitely on board with that. So I was really thankful for that. And one thing I want to tell everybody, Larkspur is doing the Rose Bowl dance again. Best party ever, 20-piece orchestra with the old-fashioned Rat Pack dancing on September 21st. And we're gonna mark it there to get everyone to come to Oktoberfest a couple weeks later, so.
Great, thank you. And the only thing I have to report, I attended the Climate Mayor's Leadership Forum in Miami Beach, and then after that, I also attended the Aspen Ideas Climate Conference. I don't usually go to these things unless they're Cal Cities, but this was comped by the organization, so I had no problem going. It was actually really interesting. One of the highlights that I wanted to share is we got to tour the Florida International University microgrid project. So they're setting up a microgrid on their university campus. They've got a bunch of solar panels to generate their own energy. They've got their own massive utility scale battery backup on site. And they've basically set up a system where if there's a power outage due to a hurricane or something, they can basically island the university and have power through their solar panels and their batteries, even if the surrounding area does not have power. So it's an interesting thought to bring back home to Marin. I know it's something that local communities and agencies are always kind of discussing and thinking about. I think it's a huge undertaking, so I don't know that we're there yet in terms of seeing a path to how we might implement this, in Corte Madera or regionally, but it's certainly something I think that we should all be thinking about and keeping our eyes open for, any opportunities that we may see to kind of put our heads together on advancing this. Because I think it's a matter of when, not if, microgrids are going to start to become, part of your standard, like, resiliency toolkit for cities. So I thought that was really fascinating. But that is all that I have to report. And so with that concludes our council reports. Do we have any comments on the draft agenda for our next council meeting? And if not, we're going to adjourn the council meeting and convene the March 19th meeting of the Sanitary District 2 Board of Directors.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, so.
Yeah. Lorena, can we have a roll call, please?
Board Member Casissa?
Here.
Board Member Lee?
Here.
Board Member Thomas?
Here.
Vice President Ravazio?
Here.
President Beckman?
Here, thank you. We're going to have open time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items not on tonight's agenda. Do we have any members of the public here in person who would like to comment on anything not on our agenda? Seeing none. Do we have any folks on Zoom who would like to comment on something not on tonight's agenda? If so, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom.
We don't have any hands raised or emailed public comment for this item.
Sounds good. We're not seeing any hands up for open time, so we'll close open time. We have no presentations tonight, which brings us to item 4, our consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been previously discussed and do not require further discussion. Any member of the board or public may pull a consent calendar item for discussion. Would any board members like to pull a consent calendar item? Seeing none, we'll open it up to public comment. If any members of the public would like to pull a consent calendar item, please line up at the podium if you're here in person or put your hand up via Zoom. Not seeing anyone in person. Do we have any hands up on Zoom?
We do not have any hands raised on Zoom or emailed public comment for this item.
Great, thank you. So I'll bring the sanitary district 2 consent calendar back to the board for a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve consent items 4A and 4B.
A second.
Okay, Board Member Casissa?
Yes.
Board Member Lee?
Yes.
Board Member Thomas?
Yes.
Vice President Ravazio?
Yes.
President Beckman?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Great, thank you very much. That brings us to tonight's business items. There's one staff report for the first 3 business items. I'm going to ask if we can take 6A first. So we'll take a report on 6A. We'll ask questions. We'll take public comment. We'll deliberate, and then we will vote on that resolution, and then we'll move on to 6B and C, if that sounds good. Great, thank you. So I'll turn it over to you, RJ and Fernanda, for 6A.
Let's give us 1 minute, Mayor. Okay, thank you, Board President Beckman, members of the board. So tonight we'll be discussing items 6A through 6C, and as Board President mentioned, we'll cover item 6A first. We've prepared a presentation to go over these, so I'm gonna get started. So for the whole presentation, this is really our agenda for the evening. We're going to cover background. We're going to touch on the sewer master plan and CIP budget needs one more time. And then as Board President mentioned, we'll take comments and questions from the public and the board and potentially consider that resolution. Secondly, we'll be going into a presentation. We have NHA advisors here to assist with that on the rate study report and some of the funding recommendations there and next steps. So with that, let's start with quick recap on the sanitary sewer master plan, some of the kind of primary goals and objectives. So really it was to evaluate our existing conditions of our facilities, come up with a plan to comply with a legal settlement we reached with Riverwatch, which is an environmental advocacy group, make upgrades to our GIS network that help us operate more efficiently, develop a defensible capital improvement program that meets the goals of being a environmentally responsible and reliable sanitary agency. Look at perform a rate study analysis to fund the necessary infrastructure for the next 10 years and use that as a roadmap moving forward. And then also look at vulnerabilities related to future sea level rise. So going back to recap, this isn't the first time that this has come to the board, as you well know. So, originally this contract was awarded to GHD Consultants back in spring of 2021. That team, along with their sub-consultants, worked diligently for 2.5 years doing technical analysis and field analysis, working also hard with sanitary district staff, Fernanda Stefanik in particular. Then in October 17, so last fall, we did an initial presentation and presented our draft master plan for kind of first round of comments, suggestions. And I think we had a productive meeting here with council or with the board, and got some good feedback and had some questions that we had to take back and kind of respond to. One of the feedback at that time was to, as we approach the next phase, which is really this 10-year CIP budget and rate study, was to set up a workshop to really try to engage our community, our ratepayers about, what is the best way to approach funding what we believe are necessary capital improvement needs. So that was held on February 6th. That was a special meeting of the sanitary board. Again, another thorough meeting with lots of good questions and lots of diving into the details. And so at any point we can revisit that, but really tonight is going to be a higher level, just kind of overview of some of those talking points. And then where we left it was to take some of the original funding scenarios that were presented at that workshop and then focus on kind of this hybrid model, is what we kind of coined it, but then run it by the finance committee and really see, to what level we can reduce the bonding by still hitting some target rate numbers for year 1 and 5. And so that meeting occurred. Both our town manager and NHA administered that with the finance committee, and we'll talk about some of the feedback there. Just high level, going over in specifics on the master plan process. The consultant reviewed 44 miles of, basically the internal pipes that make up our collection system, field and desktop analysis of our 19 district pump stations, reviewed our other assets such as valves, force mains, and pumps to investigate the condition of these appurtenances and to basically forecast how much remaining life they have. And overall, just to look at the system as a whole for any deficiencies or capacity issues that should be addressed or considered in the upcoming near future for projects. So one of the main kind of big ticket items that came out of that is some work needed on our Paradise pump station and our force main, which pushes the bulk of our effluent from Corte Madera over to CMSA. So on a average day, on a dry day, it's usually operating at about 1 million gallons per day. In the wet weather months, it can be as high as 6. That's really the peak that we would maybe see in a kind of maximum event. That's basically what the pump station is designed to. And the pump station itself has a number of issues that we've reported on with, in particular, variable frequency drives that continue to shut down when we need them most in winter wet season, and have led to some spills and some very close calls on major events too. And this has really been a high risk and concerning thing that has kind of plagued us the last at least 2 winter seasons. Two. So that's a project that back in January, I think it was, or sorry, no, before then, we were given authority to proceed with design work. And so the team has prepared that. The current estimated cost of that one is $9.8 million. Secondly, on the force main itself, that the plastic HDPE pipe from Paradise Pump Station to the other side of the Corte Madera Creek, but it has a series of valves and air valves and other facilities that have been in the ground for 30 plus years. And these are underground and corrosive environments, and are at the end of their service life and are at risk of failure in the near future. And so we need to come up with a plan on how to swap them out and replace them with newer units that can serve the next 30+ years. Doing that, however, at this time is a pretty challenging and risky endeavor. Really, you'd be shutting down our pump station for 4 to 6 hours over an evening and creating a temporary bypass through mobilizing a lot of the effluent through using trucks, and then also hoping that you can remove and replace the valve before everyone wakes up the next morning in time for their morning shower and other duties. So it's really been a recommendation from the consultant. It's been considered best practice to create this level of redundancy. It has operational benefits, and that it provides it easier to replace some of these deficient valves and other infrastructure, and then at the same time providing a secondary facility should we need it in times of emergency, or potentially if ever in the future, need for more capacity. Anyway, it would become an asset at that point, and that is a price tag of 11.5 million for that parallel force main and to repair the valves. So this table really just kind of summarizes a number of, basically all of the costs in these kind of main categories. And then it also breaks it down into current funding levels, what we're calling our recommended level here in the middle. That's really boxed in the red dashed line. And then the unconstrained would be, we have all the money in the world and we're going to fix every deficiency that we're aware of. And so, as you can see, over a 10-year horizon, it's a $9.78 million price tag, and that includes our staffing and operation maintenance and costs to CMSA and everything. So that is what we are recommending as part of our resolution to approve the sewer master plan. And again, we've got other slides we can revisit if needed, but really just wanted to be here for questions. Do you have any more since our last visit?
Great, thank you, RJ. Any questions from the board on the sewer master plan?
I just have one quick question. I know this is 10 years out. How often is the master plan? How often will it be updated?
Yeah, so I mean, we're designing it to really set up a game plan for the next 10 years. So right around 7-8 years, we'd want to start the next one.
Okay.
Look at the 11 through 20.
Okay, thanks.
Question, with the help of the finance committee, did you come up with the right balance for the bond versus the rate increases and how all that's going to happen? Is that a different presentation, or is that
Yeah,
tonight?
We'll get into that right after.
that'll be
this.
part
Okay,
two.
okay, sorry.
You're good.
So the red rectangle in the middle, that includes building the redundancy as well. So, right?
Yes.
So the unrestrained, that's just fixing more things more in the present rather than waiting for them to
Right.
break
So if you
down.
recall, so we went into existing facilities and we had our pipe network and we had them scored in 1 through 5.
Mhm.
This scenario really is going to target all the 5s and some of the 4s, and it's going to defer and monitor the rest. If we had all the money in the world, we'd also hit the 3s and 2s. Likewise on pump stations, same approach, separating tiered priorities, hitting kind of the higher tier issues and deferring and monitoring on the rest, and so on and so forth.
Okay. And this is it's 10 years that the master plan is covering, but is the work that's being proposed be done within that 10 years? Or is it beyond that?
Yeah, so we have a specific, and actually part of the staff report I should have.
Yeah, I probably have it
Okay.
here.
We have a map that really targets all of the things that we're trying to accomplish in the 10 years.
Mhm.
And really, the rate study is designed to, we can't predict inflation in 5+ years, but it generally is designed to fund those projects through 10 years. We can only do rate increases 5 years at a time. But we may, like I've said before, it might be something on a lesser level of inflation type increase, after this initial 5 years, but it's built in to capture the majority of the costs within the 10-year program.
And then there's some sort of contingency within that in case some of the threes become fives in the interim.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There is and this will get into, I think, part of the second part, but we have a capital reserve that could be used, and then separately, if we have some redundancy built in and some contingency built in, but if they go so far out of whack, that's when in year 6 it goes from an inflation to a slightly more than inflation type rate increase.
Okay, thank you.
My only question, and it sounds like you maybe just said this is a part 2 question, but I just wanted to ask this 10-year CIP, which is based off the sewer master plan. This recommended scenario is designed to preserve our capital reserve, correct?
Yes.
Which we had set by policy.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, to preserve $2.5 million.
Perfect.
For emergency reserve plus an amount also for capital.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's all the questions from the board. We'll take public comment on the sewer master plan. I'm not seeing anyone in the chamber that would like to speak on this in person. Do we have any hands up for public comment on the sewer master plan via Zoom?
We do not have hands raised on Zoom or emailed public comment for the master plan.
Okay, thank you. So we will bring the sewer master plan, which is item 6A, and is associated with resolution number. Oh, goodness.
02/2024.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll bring that back to the board here for discussion and a possible motion.
I move we accept the motion. We're good.
Second.
Yeah, and I would just make the comment, RJ, really appreciate, and Fernanda, I know a lot of work went into this. This was like a 3-year undertaking to generate this master plan. And we've deferred a lot of maintenance over the decades. And it feels really good to know that we've kind of put a stop to that. And we now we've wrapped our heads around the state of the entire sanitary sewer system. And we now have the information that we need to proceed in what I think is a much more responsible manner of keeping our sewer system properly maintained. So thank you.
My only question is, what do the other sanitary districts do without an RJ? How do they do it? I don't know.
Okay, I'll call the vote. Board Member Casissa?
Yes.
Board Member Lee?
Yes.
Board Member Thomas?
Yes.
Vice President Ravazio?
Yes.
President Beckman?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Great, thank you. So we're now going to move on to items 6B and 6C, which we're going to take together. 6B is a presentation of our 2024 wastewater cost of service and a rate study. And then 6C is going to be a resolution potentially adopting the rates proposed in that study. So I'm going to turn it over to RJ again. No, correction? Shaking head. Oh, no, you're right. It's calling for a public hearing. Calling for a public hearing where we will discuss and at that point potentially adopt the rates proposed in the presentation that is 6B. Thank you. Important distinction. All right, RJ, please.
Thank you. So I've got a few introduction slides, but then I'm going to turn it over to Craig Hill with NHA Advisors. And Craig, if you don't mind using the podium, but just want to mention that as part of that GHD contract for the master plan, they had a sub-consultant, Raf Tellis, who specializes in rate studies. So they've actually prepared a rate study report. NHA has helped us and taken the lead through kind of the financing options, and also will be help presenting that report today. So to look at just kind of the history of the Sanitary District 2 annual rates, the last increase was in 2010, which brought it up to $498 plus a $2 county processing fee. Using U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and engineering news records, city cost index for San Francisco data, basically construction costs and inflation, just taking that 498 amount up through those indexes would get you to $749 through 2023. So just a point worth making as we kind of get into the rates discussion about what the $498 kind of felt to the people back in 2010. And the other thing I wanted to address before handing it over to Craig is just kind of some basic questions. Why weren't rates increased sooner? So I've mentioned in the past that really a couple of factors. The bulk of the current staff came on in 2018 and beyond. And at that time, we had a surplus of $12 million in our capital fund. And so it didn't seem appropriate to really even consider increasing rates when we had all this money left to spend. But here's a short list of kind of the, big, more notable projects that have been completed between 2018 and now. And, you can see, we've been pretty aggressive with our projects and have shown we can deliver quite a bit. So that's the good news. And that's been a big improvement to our infrastructure. The bad news is the surplus is gone. And so we either have to, adjust or come with more funds. The other one I'm going to note is obviously, the sewer master plan that was last accepted or adopted was from circa 2009. There was some work done in 2014, but not enough to give us what I would call a decisive framework of how to proceed. There were some projects to consider and some memos and other things, but really the investment in that plan, which started, as I mentioned before, in spring of 2021, has really built and helped us develop this plan that will really guide us for the next 10 years. So all those factors really went into why we hadn't brought the rates for possible increase sooner. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Craig Hill with NHA Advisors to talk about the rate study.
Good evening. Yes, I'll pretend to be your rate consultant tonight and kind of go through some of what has happened. And as RJ just walked through, the reason you need to do a rate study is once the engineers figure out what you have to spend to either replace or improve your existing infrastructure, you have to figure out how to pay for it. So there's the engineering component, which is all done through the master plan. And then you concurrently or towards the end of that need to do a rate study. And the rate study really has a couple of key components that are both legal and procedural. And what the rate study is doing is it's trying to figure out how do you pay for all of these costs that are being identified over an extended period of time. And as RJ mentioned, while you're trying to do a 10-year or a 1-decade long capital plan, you're really only trying to identify how to pay for the first 5 years through rates. We don't really want to establish 10 years of rates knowing that we might have been off on a couple of assumptions in year 3 or 4 and you're kind of locked and loaded. So we think that it's appropriate and it's best practices to really look at 5 years. To your question, Board Thomas, you do have the ability to, should something come up, an emergency, a capital project that was not anticipated, that's a lot more expensive that was in the plan, the board could choose to go through another rate hearing or as we're going to be talking about later tonight in it sooner than after 5 years. And we've had districts that have had to do that for whatever reason, an emergency repair, something they have to go out and raise rates to increase more revenue. So it isn't something that you're absolutely married to for the next 5 years, but you like to do it for 5 years for the reason we'll talk about when we get to the financing. So the rate study is really intended to look at the dollars, look at your existing customer base and your operational costs. It's kind of like a financial audit almost. And then from that information, figure out, okay, well, what do the rates need to do in order to pay for it? And we had this conversation with the board a couple months ago that was really trying to say, well, if you want to pay for all of this with cash, right, we're going to need to supersize the rates to generate the kind of cash that you need to pay for it, or you can finance a portion of it and maybe create some relief on how much you need to raise the rates. So there were a number of scenarios that were run by Roth Tellis, the rate consultant. And through that process and through some conversations we had with staff, we've honed it down to what you're going to see tonight. So next slide. As I mentioned, what's important is that the rates need to, they're forward looking, and it's critical that we make sure, and especially with you collecting most of your revenues through the property tax, that you've got sufficient cash flow coming from those revenues to cover your operational costs. It's also important to know that it's a business, right? This isn't the town. It's not the general fund that may or may not decide to help out in a good year or bad year. You're really operating this as a zero profit business. Yes, the only thing you really have working for you, there's no profit, but you want to maintain reserves, right? A capital reserve in case RJ says something's going to cost a little bit more than what you budgeted for, or an economic uncertainty reserve for people failing to make their property tax payments, right? There's just a number of different things that might affect your cash flow, and those are done through reserves. They're not done through profit that you might have made in a prior year. So we don't think of things as profit. We always think of any net revenue, positive net revenues are going to be either put into reserves or applied to additional capital. And you'll certainly, as you saw from that big long list with the red box, you've got a lot of capital that could be accelerated. If things are going great and you're actually accumulating excess revenues, that's a good problem to have, because you'll be able to accelerate projects at probably a lower cost. So it ends up being a win-win. Next slide. When we think about how rates adjust and what and why we didn't, and RJ showed that earlier slide where it was, hey, the rates have been frozen for 10 years or 14 years, right? So had they been even increasing it basically at an inflation rate, they would be $250 higher than they are today. So we don't want to call it a catch up, but we do need to recognize that from a policy perspective, as the board can get into a cadence where it is creating an annual increase, that will be a lot less impactful to the customer base than having it done on a every 15-year basis, or really trying to get caught up for what it wouldn't have been in the past. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next slide. So as we get into what rates do for the finance, and as I mentioned, there was a lot of math that went into the modeling. So credit to Roth Tellis for really not only understanding and auditing the operations of the district, but then trying to figure out that with the nuances where we could go with rates to the different customer base, as well as where and when do we need to collect the revenues to go into some of these reserves. You'll see in a later slide that we don't really hold to your policy every year exactly how much is going into those or being maintained in those reserves, because there will be years that RJ and staff will be spending a significant amount of money on some of those capital projects. So you will have years where you're spending more than it's not an average of 9 million a year. I mean, it is, the average is 9 million a year, but you'll have years where you're spending 14 million and you'll have years where you're spending 6. So we're just trying to look at this over a window of time to figure out where do we really want to target those reserves and kind of think that they're going to live for that 5-year period of time. And once we know that, then we can kind of reverse engineer, well, then how much does it really mean we need to raise rates? So as we discussed, we've got a couple of different, we've got a CIP reserve, which is an important one for just dealing with this massive capital plan. The O&M reserve is critical, right? That's the operations. When we talk about financing and we had this conversation with the board earlier, if you're going to issue bonds, the bondholders are going to expect that the district maintains and has revenues to be able to pay back the debt service on the bonds, right? So the first thing they care about more than anything is that you absolutely keep the system running, because nobody's going to pay a service if they can't use it, right? And investors know that. So we want to make sure that we have this O&M reserve, because it is really what is going to be used to make sure that the pumps are working and the service is being provided. This is our shock value graph for everybody to understand that if we do, so you've approved the master plan, congratulations. If we do nothing in terms of raising rates, you can see where your fund balances go and how quickly they go. Not only do they not meet your policy objectives for your reserves, but you're actually obviously bleeding from a cash perspective and running short. So this is our base zero status quo model of what we need to solve for, given the CIP plan that you've just previously discussed and approved. Next slide. So this table represents what we are proposing to be the rate increases. And this is a derivation from what was shown to you earlier and after the conversations we had with the finance committee. So what we were able to do is, through the direction of the board, is really go back and refine the model to obviously not assume 100% financing and all this, and not assume 100% cash flowed through the rates. So we were able to take the pressure off in those earlier years and look at really an objective that met the cash flow needs with only needing to issue 2 series of bonds. And as RJ has mentioned to you, there's a need to get this first project going ASAP. So given how you collect your revenues through property tax, and you won't really see the first one until December, the proposal is, and the financing plan would be, to issue $10 million in bonds. That'll give you the cash to jumpstart the projects. A lot of the other CIP will then be paid for through the rates that come forward. And then in 2020, fiscal year 2027, we would supplement it with another $10 million bond issue. So a total of about 20 that would cover the critical projects that are needed really over the next 3 years. And then as you can see, again, that we're kind of shocking the system with the 40% and then feathering down with a 30, a 20, and then single digits after that. Again, this would be what would be proposed as a 5-year rate increase. So it would be, once we get through the public hearing process, it gets adopted. You would still have the ability to revisit this if there was some change to your financial position on a year-to-year basis. We would be looking at it and kind of reevaluating, but we anticipate that this should be sufficient to deal with all of your CIP. Next slide. Though those proposed rate increase percentages will do 2 things. The chart on or the graph on the left represents your ability to repay the investors through the net revenues that will be generated with those higher charges. So as you can see, that number exceeds 100, which is what you need, 100 cents on the dollar to pay back 100 cents of debt service. And this will help your very strong credit. And this is going to help make any bonds that you borrow come out at the lowest possible interest rate. On the right are really, I think, the most important part for the board, which is, how does this proposed rate increase handle our policies and our objectives for our reserves? And so each of those horizontal lines represents the different policy reserve components. And as you can see, the bars are bouncing around over the year as more cash is used for projects or less in others. And you can see that what we're trying to really do is average in there and be able to say that we're meeting most of the reserve. The top line, the dark line, is really kind of if we could get everything we want, But again, we're compromising and we don't want to stress the rates any more than we need to. And in our opinion or professional opinion, we think that this is appropriate. Next slide. So what does this mean for the real dollars, right? We've been talking percentages. What does it mean to the actual rate? As RJ mentioned, the current rate is right at $500 with the billing fee. And we're proposing that it will, starting in the next tax cycle, it will gradually go up to the targeted number that was kind of directed from the board when we talked about this before it went to the finance committee, of trying to get in that $1,200 range after 5 years. And we think we can achieve that, as well as achieve the cash flow that we need for the projects between now and 2029. So I think that is there another slide? Oh, the survey. The most important part, how are you relative to your neighbors? Right. And this is, you saw this earlier in a prior presentation. We have adjusted it accordingly with what are the proposed rates. As you can see, the two dark bars, and you are still significantly going into the current year lower than what the average is across some of your peers throughout the county. I don't know. Do we have anybody outside the county in that sample? I can't see that.
I know we looked at some, but I think we've since pulled them.
This is pretty much all. Okay. So that's, I would say that this is good news in terms of where you are and where you're proposed to go even after 5 years. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or kick it back to staff.
Yeah, we're happy to answer any questions. Happy to answer your questions you have on the presentation and the possible resolution.
Great, thank you. So we'll take questions from the board now on the 2024 rate study. Any questions? We'll start down here.
No questions for me.
No questions, Rosa? No questions?
Yeah, I gotta go back to slides, but I think a $10 million raise, yeah, for year end 2025.
The first bond series would be for 10 million.
Yeah.
In fiscal year 24-25.
Okay, I guess I saw for year end 25 and I'm thinking year end 25.
Oh,
but you're saying it's 24-25.
No, I think we're anticipating, depending on the timing of the bid for the project, that it would probably be in the fall, late summer or fall.
Okay, are interest rates somewhat favorable now in these bonds? And I know you can't predict interest rates. If you can, you'd be working for the Fed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, yeah, I flew out here just for this. I'm coming back for the meeting this week. We've got all that going on. Yes. You know, the rates improved at the end of of 23. They deviated and kind of came back. And there's a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen this week on an international level as well as inside the States. So let's have this conversation in a week and we'll know whether we're trending down or it's either going to be flat or trending down. Nobody's suggesting that things should raise them.
No. Okay, and it looked like the second one is in 27. Do you do remodel all this stuff between now and then? Or is 20, in other words, 27 may not be a hardcore year, right? You could sit there saying you need a year later or have
yeah, that's a great question. There's going to be two variables that are going to drive that. First one is going to be timing of the projects and when we need the big next bid ask that's going to, drive the cash position. And the second one, which will really be on us, is monitoring the market. So if the rates are lower, we're assuming in this model, there may be a reason to either borrow more at the lower rate because it's going to cost you the same. It's kind of like a mortgage, right? So we may be able to juice the CIP program if rates are favorable, somewhere within plus or minus that 2-year window that we're looking at for 2027. So yes, it's not static. It is anticipated. It's projected to be a $10 million issue at that time, but I would expect it could be plus or minus a couple million and plus or minus a year.
Okay.
And I won't suggest that there'll be a delay, but in my professional opinion, after 35 years of doing this, We might be talking about 28 and 29 if things just aren't getting done as fast as everybody would like.
Okay, and then 10 million, we would get 10 million coming in cash, I want to say through the bonds. We sit on that money in the interest bearing account. So we get a little bit off of that until the money goes out for construction project. I'm not advocating to hedge it or anything like that, or do options or do anything crazy. It's just flat out from an interest standpoint. It'd be sitting there.
Yeah, we actually generally look at it the opposite, right? We aren't trying to play a game of borrowing the money and then investing it. We actually want to know and have confidence that through the bidding process, you don't have any surprises on your project cost. So a lot of times we'll actually wait, and that will probably be what happens here even in this fall, where we'll get the bids in hand, haven't awarded yet, but you'll get the bids in hand. You'll kind of say, okay, are those in line with what we assumed? Are they higher than what we assumed? And then we'll adjust the bond accordingly. You know, we'll issue that bond to tie nicely with the project, as opposed to, oh, let's just borrow the money and then hope that in 6 months or a year, the project comes up. We've learned our lesson with some school districts about how you don't want to borrow everything and then find out you don't have enough to finish the project.
Okay, and the last question is on the debt coverage. We're like, if I have that correct, we're like 5 times debt coverage. Is that normal? I'm used to like more like 2 times, but maybe that's sort of 6 times. Commercial property.
Yeah, so it's extremely high for 2 reasons. One is this model is depressing how much we're borrowing, right? We wanted to try to set a rate model that could pay for as much of it with cash as possible. If we had done, if you will remember that scenario, the shock scenario that we provided last time, which was basically finance all of it to try to really minimize the rate, that line would be a lot lower. It was still about 2 times, I believe. So it was still really strong, but it's really high right now because we're really only borrowing $10 million.
Yeah, and I'm happy to also elaborate on that. Really what's driving, if we look at this chart here, the line chart here, what's driving this is the fiscal year 2026. So, we've decided we've been historically holding a $2.5 million emergency reserve. And so at this stage, we're projecting based on our CIP needs to be at 3 million, which is only 500K above that number. Obviously other years were higher, but that is really what drove us to that bond number, to setting it at 10. If that surplus was 4 million, we might have just done a bond issuance of 9 in the first year, if that makes sense.
Okay. I guess 5 times 2 helps with investors, right?
Oh, yes. It's a positive.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. First, so after the 5% increase in year 5, are we on track then to just be annually increasing by CPI, or what's kind of the thought for? I realize that this is a 5-year plan, but like, where does that leave us positioned?
So we've taken the master plan that through all the analysis, we've used some reasonable numbers for inflation, cost escalation, and ending on that, based on everything going as smooth, we actually don't necessarily need to raise rates at that time, is projected to cover us through 10 years.
Okay.
But if the cost of construction goes way up, if the cost of inflation goes way up compared to, reasonable assumptions, then obviously we're going to have some sort of deficit to reconcile.
Okay, so it sounds like our best effort is that we may actually not need to raise rates for the rest of that 10-year capital plan.
Possible.
Okay, right. If under the assumptions, like, obviously no crystal ball, but okay, thank you. So that's my first question. My second question, so this slide here showing the fund balance and those 3 different lines for 3 different reserve levels, are all 3 of those reserves set by policy?
No.
Okay, so only the O&M reserve is set by policy.
Correct. These are just general practice guidelines that other agencies might use.
Okay, that was, I was internally freaking out because I was like, we're not even coming close to some of these reserve lines, but I now understand that it's the bottom red line is our policy set reserve.
And also, let me back up 1 second to the previous question. The other scenario is, at the end of 5 years, everything goes as planned, but maybe the board wants to be more aggressive and start going after some of those medium priority or something. So that's always a likely scenario, but based on just attacking this CIP budget only and reasonable assumptions, it could fund itself through 10 years.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, Board Member Beckman, I think that there is a policy of an emergency reserve of 2.5 million, and that's the third bar, which I think RJ was referring to.
Yeah, it's actually not its own bar, but we mentioned it in the previous slides.
Well, all users are clearing that mark, so that's one.
So the middle bar, each time we hit those marks or when we draw down on a bond, so that's what sets a better, is that fund balance something that helps to then go onto the bond market as well? And that's what sets that blue,
Yeah, so those are jumping because of the bond proceeds getting put into the bucket, right?
Right.
And then they get spent down, so it draws down, and then we replenish it and it draws down again. But you'll see that in that last year, the far right, it starts to climb. So if we had projected this out for 10 years, it should be, we should be building a balance.
So that last one, right, is we're no longer doing the major capital expenditures, and our actual rates that we've set are building now a true cash surplus without borrowing more money. And that's why it could go out to 10 years, is because then we'll build a true reserve of our own and be able to self-perform moving forward without borrowing other assets.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to that point, you could pay down the debt. You could use it as more resilience for unexpected things that could occur beyond that. But certainly whatever the board decides at that point.
I mean, the master plan assumed roughly $9 million a year in CIP in years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I think it's front loaded, right? So I think we're actually doing, closer to 6
million?
7,
Okay.
7 in the back end. Yeah.
Let's go to Pat.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I have allergies this time of year and they attack every once in a while. As far as optics go on the rate increases, I was concerned by something you said. You said, I don't want to call it a catch up. We don't want to call it a catch up, but isn't that kind of what it is? And to me, it makes sense. If you say we haven't raised rates since 2010, it makes very much sense to say, here's why we're playing catch up. But you said you wouldn't want to call it that. So can you?
Well, yeah, we look at this as a moment in time where you're taking on a CIP plan, an aggressive CIP plan.
Mm-hmm.
If that was not to happen, in theory, you would only be needing to raise rates at a much lower level, right?
I see.
So I don't
get it.
I don't think of it as a catch up just to play catch up, like a salary increase or something like that. I think of it as this is a reset to address a capital plan that is meeting the needs of the district.
Got it. Thank you for that nuance of jargon. And as far as the funding for later projects, I was reading somewhere in my where to get federal funds for your local project newsletter that sewers will be included in, right now they got left out of the Inflation Reduction Act. They wouldn't actually cover sewer projects, so we couldn't get federal grants, even though we're a climate sensitive area and all that environmental thing. Is it possible that in the future we could go after grant money still for some of this?
I think there's some possibility out there. I haven't heard that from many of my colleagues in this industry, but I think there is possibility for some.
Okay, I'll watch for it in my newsletter.
I just have a couple more. Those bonds go out how many years?
We're amortizing 30.
30, okay. And then can you go to the slide that shows the rate increases? Thanks. Just to clarify, we'd be setting this for 5 years. I know there's a public hearing, a separate process for that. But all of a sudden, if as a board, we could take in 25 and decide not to raise it to the 699, correct? We could leave it at 500 if we wanted to without a public hearing. Or is there a process for that?
You can always reduce, you cannot increase above these not to exceed numbers. So through the public hearing process, you would be establishing those in stone. But you could, if it was advisable, elect to, on the next year's levy that would go to the county, choose something less. The covenant you will have, I mean, other than just from a policy perspective and staff's position on a budget that you need to make sure you're making enough is, once you issue bonds, and to your point about we're 5 times cover, we got plenty, right? It's, you will have a bond covenant that will obligate the board to make sure that they take action to raise rates sufficient to meet the debt service payments.
Okay.
Right. So, but we're clearly much higher than you. I don't foresee a reason that you would ever be close to challenging that covenant. But the answer is yes, these will be set in stone, but you could choose to not levy to the maximum if there was some good reason not.
Okay, and then the flip side of that is if we go, okay, we're not going to go to the maximum for that year, we could raise it the following year to what that year's maximum is, correct? That's okay, don't worry about it. I'll take it, don't worry about it.
Okay, question retracted. Okay, any other questions from board members?
Red scenarios.
All right, seeing none, we'll open this item up to public comment. So this is public comment on the 2024 rate study, sewer rate study. I do not see anyone in person that would like to give public comment on this item. If we have anyone on Zoom who would like to give public comment, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. And
We do not have hands raised from attendees on Zoom or emailed public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. So we will close public comment and bring this item back to the board for discussion. And a possible motion on resolution 03-2024, which accepts the 2024 wastewater rate study, not the rates, as I mistakenly said earlier, and also calls for a public hearing to potentially approve the rates proposed in the study. Do we have any thoughts or comments or additional questions from board members?
I will move that we accept this,
Great study.
so I don't have the case study, yes.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yes,
Okay.
we give it a yes.
Okay. So Pat is moving adoption of resolution number 03-2024.
Second.
I'm sorry, just one point of clarification, because there's a part 3 that directly staff to provide notice to public hearing. Is that part of the resolution? Okay, thank you.
And I'll just give I'll just make a quick comment before we vote on this, that I again want to thank RJ and Fernanda and the staff. These are by the numbers, big rate increases, but I think they're well justified, especially in light of the capital plan or the sewer master plan that we just adopted. We now understand, I would say for the first time since 2009, really fully what the needs of our sewer system are to get it back into appropriate working order. And so it makes sense. And these are big numbers again, but I think we can all feel good knowing that A, like we said, rates have not gone up in 14 years, and B, we're still going to be below the average sewer rate for the county. So I feel good. I think we should all feel good, frankly, knowing that we're positioning ourselves to deliver really ambitious work, repairing and bringing our sewer system back up to snuff, and we're doing it while still keeping our sewer rates below the average in the county. I think that's frankly impressive. So that's my only thought.
Well said.
Thank you.
Campaign speech. That's how we'll frame it.
So those are my thoughts. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that, board president. Board member Casissa,
Yes.
board member Lee,
Yes.
board member Thomas.
Yes.
Vice President Ravazio.
Yes.
President Beckman.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. We're gonna move on now to item 6D, which is consideration and possible action to authorize the district manager to approve plans and contract documents and authorize advertisement for bids for the Paradise Pump Station Rehabilitation Project.
Yep. I'm just gonna load up the staff report for presentation.
Oh, Can we have a motion to extend the meeting? Do we do an hour or a half hour? Can we have a motion to extend the meeting to 10 PM, please?
Okay, make the motion to extend, meeting to 10.
I'll second.
Board Member Casissa,
Yes.
Board Member Lee,
Yes.
Board Member Thomas,
Yes.
Vice President Ravazio,
Yes.
President Beckman.
Yes,
Thank you. The motion carries.
thank you.
So this item is to discuss possible authorization to approve the plans and advertise the Paradise Pump Station Rehabilitation Project. As part of this, we're also seeking approval for a standardization of major equipment components for sewer pump stations. So this is one of the larger items that came out of the CIP Sewer Master Plan, and it's to perform a lot of necessary upgrades to our largest pump station, which, as mentioned prior, has really plagued staff and put the district at risk in terms of not being able to reliably respond to the amount of effluent that it receives due to malfunctions in VFDs and other equipment. So we came to the board and we asked for authorization to proceed with design work. And that was in May of 2023, and Schaff and Wheeler was the designer. And so that effort has proceeded. They've worked very closely with Fernanda and our district staff, as well as CMSA, and really kind of building this project to do the most benefit for our most important asset. This project involves new pumps, discharge piping valves, flow meter supports, anchorage, VFDs, PLCs, backup controllers, valves, and much of other appurtenances, and also some bypass pumping, which will be part of the challenges of the project. The need and discussion around standardization of major equipment is really what we've learned, and through some of our struggles with the faulty equipment, is that getting necessary parts in a short time is a challenge. And when I say short time, this isn't our wet well at this facility in a serious rain might only give us 26 minutes. And so having to mail something or whatnot doesn't really prevent you from anything major happening. So you immediately have to jump into emergency procedures and getting back to trucks and everything's going. But if we have across our district pump stations standard pumps, standard parts, then all of a sudden we can stock the materials that are most likely to fail in sizes that are most common for our district. And so acknowledging that we are in a public bid environment, we can, through action, allow and justify this kind of sole sourcing or standardization of. So that is part of this effort and part of the way that the team has designed this, given the struggles we had before of having these various parts that didn't match our other systems in town. Separate to that, the other key thing to mention on this project is the construction schedule. So, as discussed as part of our master plan and rate study, much of this money will need to be funded through bonding. However, we did do a cash flow analysis through the first year, or at least through the end of this calendar year, should we, receive reasonable bids, award it, and proceed through the summer. And basically, it shows that through the end of calendar year, we're right around 11% of the estimated project value, so roughly $900,000. And then if you tack on about $400,000 for contingency and construction management, we have, definitely enough to cover us in the interim until we have the timing to proceed with some bonding potentially this fall. And so that's been confirmed with our with Daria Carrillo, our finance director. But that is a fact that I want to make sure we discuss is that when you authorize it today, and we will be bringing it back for possible award once we receive bids. But know that we will have to solve this funding before too long, or we will have to negotiate a suspension of the project, or potentially reduce the scope through negotiation, or terminate the contract should we not be able to come up with those funds. But we believe it's definitely necessary given the risk that these malfunctions are having on the district right now. They are high stress for everyone involved throughout every winter season as of the last 2 winter seasons. And this project will not solve it before next winter season. We're hoping to solve it by the fall. And with that, I will open it up for any questions.
Thank you, RJ. Any questions from board members on this project?
Thank you, RJ. Just to make sure I understand this, we could vote tonight to approve putting out the bid, and you might start the project before we have a bond in place to finish the project. Is that?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And in the event that we don't, somehow the bond doesn't carry, it's not voted on, it's just someone could protest. Is that correct? Okay.
It's
the rates that are.
I think it's the board can approve the bond. Is that correct? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So at the hearing, council will adopt the rates and they'll consider any bid protests. There would have to be a majority of the property owners to protest for council to not be able to approve the rate increase. So that would be the rate increase and that approves it. I think the timing of the bond.
Yeah, there's going to be a few actions in front of the board. So tonight, move forward on preparing for bidding the project. There will be an award of the contract, so that would be back in front of you. Would that be before the public hearing for the rates?
Potentially in May, we would come back. So it's going to be right around that time, and we can obviously adjust schedule as needed.
So the risk would be that you get the bids, you award the project, and for whatever reason, when you have the public hearing for the rate increase, there's a majority protest, right? So that would terminate or stop the process to raise rates. So if you had already awarded the construction contract before that public hearing date, that would be your only potential risk.
Okay, but the work isn't going to start until we're sure we're going to be able to have the rate increase to finish it.
I mean, that depends. And that's something we'll have to analyze before I come back to you. Right now, schedule is showing that we're right up against the following winter.
Mm-hmm.
And so could be one of those things where you don't start 4 months of work in the spring unless you know you're going to finish by like August, because you get stuck not being ready. We've had storms in mid-August for sure. So I have to it's potential that weeks do matter, and I need to get an answer on that, and I will as we come back. But otherwise, if we can afford it, we would prefer to do a possible award just after the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
But to clarify, a successful protest would have to be more than 50% of the ratepayers.
Yeah.
When we have 0 showing up now to discuss it,
Right.
so it doesn't seem real likely.
It's not real yet to them.
Approximately 6,000 property owners.
Mhm.
6,000.
So
So you need
3,000.
3,000 to show up.
What a strange law.
Oh, and they literally physically have to show up?
They can file a written protest.
Oh, okay.
Something.
Okay.
So as part of our,
Letters.
yeah.
Yeah.
So as part of
Alright.
this resolution,
fairly high
you're
hurdle.
directing staff to call for the public hearing, sending a Prop 218 compliant notice to every address that is being served and every property owner, because they may not live at the same address.
Right.
And notifying of this public hearing, at which time they will be referred to our webpage and process should they want to protest.
Okay.
It will also be, it will be an opportunity also to bring them up to speed on the reasons for this, all the stuff we've been discussing for the last several meetings.
Just one quick comment on that. So it sounds like we have to provide a public notice saying we're going to do the rate increase fine. I think we should try to PR as much as we can through other media, whether that be the newsletter, whether that be the reader board, whether that be sandwich signs or whatever. So we don't get people coming back saying, I never heard of this.
Yeah.
I just think we need to get the messaging out that the rates are going to be increased.
Yeah, and I also, I think we mentioned this before the special meeting, and I just want to echo it again. I mean, we put A-framed sandwich boards everywhere. I don't remember the exact count, but it was 20 or so. And it wasn't just Corte Madera, it was the parts of the district in Larkspur County. So even if people aren't paying attention on email, they pass by multiple sandwich boards for, many days, if not several weeks.
Just a reminder for folks, I know it's late, but we're in questions right now. Any other questions from council or from board members? Okay, I've just got one question. Just curious about the process here, RJ. I know sometimes when you bring us projects, whether it's SD2 or the council, the motion will be to approve contract documents, advertise for bids, and award a bid below a certain not to exceed price. Just curious why that's not the case here.
It's just such a big project,
No, I
and I want to be able to run the bids by you guys.
Makes sense. That's great from a public process standpoint. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, so if not, we will open the Paradise Pump Station project up to public comment. I do not see anyone in person wishing to give public comment. Do we have anyone with their hands up via Zoom who'd like to give public comment?
We do not have anyone online with their hands raised or email public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close public comment and bring this item back to the board for discussion and a possible motion. Any thoughts? Yeah, you look ready.
Let's do it.
I'll give one thought actually. Sorry. First of all, kudos on standardizing the equipment. I think that's a smart idea. I didn't know if you had a thought or a motion. One other thing for you on the outreach around this, I appreciate, like I've seen the reader boards that you guys put out and stuff. For the rate workshops though, they said SD2 rate. People don't know what that is. So if we could please on like all the communication we're doing, please say sewer rate, because people know what the sewer rate is. I didn't know what SD2 was before I was running for town council. So
Your sewer rates are going up.
yeah, just to be as transparent as possible. So thank you. And with that, Charles, if you please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve item as requested for project number 23202.
Second.
Board Member Casissa?
Yes.
Board Member Lee?
Yes.
Board Member Thomas?
Yes.
Vice President Ravazio?
Yes.
President Beckman?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our business items. Do we have a district manager report?
I did a one item report. We were, or it appears we're going to be successful getting some FEMA funds for some of our emergency response through those Vector trucks.
Nice.
In the neighborhood of $50,000. So, that's all good money. So
Great work. Thank you. Do we have any board member reports? Are you guys sure? Okay. All right. Any comments on our draft agenda for the next meeting? No, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.